shit. There we go. Technical fail. Love it. Hello and welcome to TYT Community Live here on the TYT Network. The only show, of course, paneled by fans and members of the Young Turks. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. I am joined by some of my rowdy friends, Stephen Buckley, Nick, I can never say your last name, and Jordan French. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hello.
Glad to have you guys in the show. We've got a lot of really important stories. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on Ferguson. We're going to have a really involved discussion on some different points about Ferguson, eyewitness accounts of the event. Some of the reporters from Washington Post, Huffington Post were arrested. We got some video on that. We're going to have a discussion on the militarization of the police. That's really important. And then second half of the show, we're going to turn around. We're going to have a little bit more politics and some lighter stories. We'll talk about how lazy Congress is, yet they still get paid. And goofy religious Republicans. That's always a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that second half of the show. And if you guys are interested, we'll do a little bit of Q&A. Now, I realize we're having some YouTube issues with the lag, so I do apologize if you guys are getting a lot of lag here on our feed. There's nothing really we can do about it. Hell, we're lucky to even be able to do the show today, because I nearly got locked out of my out of the Hangouts. Luckily, I was able to fix that up, but still, bear with us through technical difficulties, technical issues. YouTube is broken. It's not on our end for this. It's not our fault this time. We didn't do it. It's a likely story, right? They'll believe it. Right?
Sean did it.
Sean did it? That's it.
Yep. That's right. That's why he's not here. Sabotage.
Right. That's right. Listen, all y'all. Sabotage. Beastie Boys reference. I know. Okay, so speaking of some disasters that we have going on, we've got huge protests still going on in Ferguson, Missouri. Let me switch over. And go. All right. Awesome. Protests in Missouri started after an 18-year-old man was shot and killed by police officers in the town of Ferguson last Saturday. So what happened? Well, there are two different accounts. One account is from the St. Louis County Police Department, which, by the way, earlier today was pulled off duty following the protests by Governor Jay Nixon. Now they're being replaced. Now, what they said for their account is that Michael Brown had apparently, according to them, allegedly assaulted a police officer in his car and was attempting to reach for his weapon, and that is what led to the fatal shooting. Now, of course, I'm not quite buying that account, and several witnesses are disputing that. Now, the first one was the man that was actually traveling with Brown, and we have an interview portion that he did with MSNBC. Got the video for that, so let's watch.
It was around 1:40, 2 o'clock. We were walking down the street, empty street. We were just walking down, minding our own business. We both headed home, and the officer is approaching us, and as he pulled up on the side of us, he didn't say freeze, halt, or nothing like we were committing a crime. He said, get the F on the sidewalk. I told the officer we were not but a minute away from the destination. He's at an angle where we're so close to his door and him that when he tries to thrust the door open aggressively, it doesn't come an inch out before it strikes both of us. His arm extended out the window, grabbed my friend around the neck, He didn't say step back or anything like that. He started to pull my friend into the window. So the officer's trying to pull him in, and he's pulling away from the officer. He never once attempted to grab for this officer's weapon. He's still holding my friend with one arm, and now with the other hand, he's pointing his weapon. The second time he says, "I'll shoot," it wasn't even a second later before the gun just went off, and the officer let go. And I'm watching the officer. He's pursuing my friend now. Then he fired another shot. It struck my friend in the back. Then my friend stopped running. His hands immediately went in the air, and he turned around towards the officer face to face. He started to tell the officer that he was unarmed and that you should stop shooting me. Before he can get his second sentence out, the officer fired several more shots into his head and chest area, and he fell dramatically in the fatal position. I did not hear once he yelled freeze, stop, or hope. It was just horrible to watch. It hurt him a lot. I see it in his eyes. It hurt him a lot. It was definitely.
Yeah, that's I mean that's really kind of hard to watch. But this isn't the only eyewitness account that doesn't match up with that official police account. So we've got another clip. I'm going to show you that. Hold. Difficulties today. Hold. We'll have the video here in a minute. If you guys want to just say something really quick while I get this figured out.
Well, just figuring that out. Just recently, people might not have seen or might not be aware, but they've currently got a new police chief in the town at the moment now. And earlier tonight, he was walking with the protesters, still saying kind of we want kind of justice, kind of we want peace sort of thing. Kind of we need to end this cycle of violence. So it seems that the new police chief, he at least seems to be more, I don't know, more tactful in the situation and more kind of sensitive to kind of people's feelings. So hopefully, this new police chief is going to be turning kind of the corner of this violent situation. It's certainly a bonus. I think he's asked a number of the SWAT teams to leave, and hopefully that shouldn't cause any more problems. If anything, that's not going to exacerbate the problem. That's going to make it a bit easier. Jordan, you've got anything else to add about the current situation there?
No, that was news to me. I didn't realize that Ferguson had gotten a new police chief. When did this happen?
I think it was yesterday that was announced. Where did I see it? I just got rid of the link. Never mind. It was. I think they got rid of the old one. I mean, I'll talk about it in a sec when Jeff shows the other video. But the pre-police chief, he seemed to be just. I don't know whether he just didn't seem to be in control of the situation. It's the case in point when the journalists were arrested later. I think that this, and also the previous police chief's wife, she said some pretty, I don't know if you'd class them as horrendous, but they're bordering on racist comments on her Facebook page. She was found out, and then her Facebook post went kind of semi-viral on Twitter. She was kind of referring to these people, they're savages, can only use violence. They kind of mooch off kind of benefits, off the hard-paying, tax-paying American. Obviously not thinking that blacks in America are tax-paying Americans seem to be the thing she was suggesting. So I think overall it seems if this new police chief, Ron, I can say Ron Swanson, but that's the guy from Family Guy. It's Ron something or other. He, as I said, he does seem to be more sensitive, and he seems to be on the side of the people rather than on the side of the heavy-handed kind of police officers, at least. And he wants a proper investigation. He wants to know who actually, or kind of what actually unfolded. And from what most people have been saying, it seems like the initial kind of police report was completely fabricated, padded out to try and save their own skin, it was announced by. Have you fixed it, Jeff?
Yeah. Speaking of other eyewitness accounts and basically the police statement not holding any water, we've got another video here that I'm gonna show you guys. So of more eyewitnesses.
Peter J. Crenshaw and Tiffany Mitchell, they were there, and along with Tiffany's attorney, Peter Cohen, they say that they witnessed what happened that night. But we have video that I believe you shot of what happened. Let's take a look at this, and you can tell us what you saw. What is this?
Okay, what I saw was when the cop and Michael were, like, wrestling through the window. It looked as if Michael was pushing off and the cop was trying to pull him in. Then the cop shot a fire through the window. Michael breaks away and he starts running away from the officer. The officer gets out of his vehicle and pursues Michael as he's shooting his weapon. Michael jerks his body as if he was hit. Then he turns around, faces the officer, and puts his hands up. And the officer continues to shoot him until he goes down to the ground.
And of course, that video that you were watching on CNN actually was taken by one of the witnesses. The after, what happened afterwards, the part that was Michael's body, and that was his uncle running up to see if if that was him. So, and you could see the officer running off screen. So he was far away when he, did the fatal shots. So, but like I said, what do you guys think about this? I mean, he was shot at from the car. He ran, he was shot, probably hit, like it said. He turned around, hands up, and just shot multiple times after that, far away. And I mean, you gotta ask who's credible at this point. I mean, what does the evidence suggest to you guys?
I would say the two corroborating witness stories that seem to match up almost perfectly in describing how this poor kid was gunned down. So that makes a lot more sense to me than the cop story, where there's only an official statement from the police department. But these are a bunch of independent witnesses who say they saw it, and their stories are all pretty much the same thing. And it's unbelievable. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, like, it just seems incredible that obviously kind of the victim here, he wasn't any real threat to the officer. He was running away. Even in the cops' kind of report, it said, he's kind of shot at over a distance of 35 feet, which is some distance away. He was running away. He was no threat. He wasn't armed. And, there's been a lot of talk now, like, why cops, like, in some situations, cops need to shoot to kill. That's obvious. In cases like this, like, at a worst case scenario, he maybe should have kind of, like, shot at his legs or something like that, just once. A warning shot, because then most people will stop running away if you're shooting at them. But even then, what's the worst case? I mean, the victim here, he didn't do anything wrong at all. As far as all accounts go, he hadn't broken any laws. And you think, what's the worst that would happen? Okay, he escapes. He runs away, even if he had broken the law. You'll catch him another day, sort of thing. It's not as if he's a murderer or anything. That's the worst that can happen. The cop's just like, no, I'm just going to shoot him, and shoot him multiple times. It's something wrong with the mentality of certain kind of precincts and cops here. That's what I think the main problem is.
And keep in mind, this isn't like this is worse than the Trayvon Martin case. I mean, in that case, we had a neighborhood watch and a dead victim on the scene, and then we determined through other things like a phone call that the kid had been on with a friend of his at the time that, or at least when I say we, I mean the vast majority of the American public and the international public who were watching this determined pretty quickly that this wasn't what happened. But this is different. This scene has witnesses. This has people who saw it happen. And that's why everybody's so angry about it, too. There's nothing really unclear about this. The people you'll find defending this cop and saying that this was, he was justified and there was this good reason he had, they are a much, much, much smaller percentage of the population than those who defended George Zimmerman at the start. And I say at the start because by the end, very few defended George Zimmerman.
Yeah, and you know, look at what happened. I mean, look at the reason that this whole thing started in the first place. Get the F off the road. That's it. Oh, we're gonna get there soon, right? No, not good enough. You get the fuck off my road now. Seriously? And then, you know, starting this altercation, opening the door, basically, like the cop car pulled up to these guys, opened the door, hit the guy with it, grabbed the kid by the neck. In what world is this okay? And you're going to have people defending that?
I want a toxicology report on this cop.
Something, man. And look, I mean, you know, again, there was no crime. There was no crime other than there was no crime.
Well, the thing is,
say, he was resisting an officer. He was assaulting an officer. He was the one who got assaulted first by the officer.
I bet you anything, just to Nick's point there, I bet if this hadn't blown up in the way that it did, and if there weren't any witnesses, it was just a kind of a cop statement and that was it, then I put a large amount of money, they would have done a toxicology report on the victim's body here and goes, kind of he was on drugs, and the media would then kind of play that angle in their coverage. But of course, there's no way that they've done a toxicology report on the cop. I mean, if he has been on some drugs, then potentially they could still kind of do a hair sample and find out. But kind of testing for alcohol now, that's too late. And the fact that the whole kind of police, seen it in so many situations now, circled the wagons, they've protected him. They said, we're going to release his name Tuesday afternoon. Didn't happen. Okay, we'll maybe do it a bit later. Still hasn't happened. Anonymous on Twitter earlier today did release a name saying, this is a cop shooter, but apparently that name isn't even on the staff list of kind of that particular cop precinct. So it's still, still no one knows who's actually killed an unarmed black teenager yet, which is an absolute outrage.
Getting back to the whole drug thing, it wouldn't matter if he were on drugs. That's still not grounds for execution. And I think really that's what this was. It was execution. Unjustified homicide.
And that's why I want a toxicology report from this cop. I'll come back to this later on, but there's the fact of the matter is they pull up to this curb, these kids have done nothing wrong at all, walking down the street, and the cop starts an altercation and then shoots and kills this kid. That's weird. That's really weird. I want to know what kind of mental state this cop was in. So, find out if the cop was on anything. That makes a lot more sense than the Zimmerman one. Zimmerman was kind of looking for a fight. This guy is
doing a lot of the research and show prep for today. I've come across articles which say that this has been brewing for a long time. Like, this area is now predominantly 2/3 black, right? Only has 3 black officers on its police force, which is rather large. It's got, I think, 50 people, 50-something people on the police force. 3 of them are African American. It used to be a whiter area, right? But I guess we had instance of white flight or something like that. A lot of the white people left the area. A lot of African American people are still there, but a lot of the representatives and people that are still in power in that area are still white. So you got a lot of racial tension in that area, especially from those who are in charge. And so I think it was only a matter of time before something like this happened with that kind of tension.
Right, but guys, here's the thing. You got to keep in mind, this was basically a lynching. That's what's so crazy. That's why I'm wondering what the hell is wrong with the cop.
I mean,
this isn't like there's a black kid. I'm gonna start something and I'm gonna kill him. This is a lynching. There's almost no other word for it.
Of course, to Jeff's point, of course this was brewing. It was evidently brewing. You don't think these cops or kind of even other cops in the area have kind of pulled alongside and essentially harassed, saying, you know, do as I said. And I assume, you know, in all other instances, kind of the other African Americans, okay, fine, sort of thing. I don't want to get shot. I've seen this story play out 100 times in the media beforehand. And also, if it had been kind of a white teenage boy, like, could anyone honestly make the argument that the cop would have just randomly pulled up and said, you know, get on the sidewalk, sort of thing? What do you think you're doing? Of course they wouldn't. It's essentially a hate crime. That's what I'd entitle it, because there's no other. There's no reason at all why he should have kind of harassed this teenager. But the fact it was a black teenager, I reckon that was a large part of the motive. You know, he wanted to assert his authority as kind of the white power authority that this cop wanted to show that he had. And when someone talked back to him, you know, or tried to wrestle away from an assault, he thought, I'm not having any of this. How dare you kind of try and challenge my authority? And just shoots him because he's got no other way of asserting his authority. It's pathetic.
And that's what it comes down to, is that how dare you challenge my authority? How dare you not listen to me and do exactly what I say when I say it? How dare you try to fight back? How dare you? You get what you deserve. Essentially is what it is.
Right, and I get that. And it would still be a terrible story. And it would even make sense if he didn't kill him and he did that. And I would get that. I would not question the mental state or the drug, whatever kind of drug state this cop might be in, if that were the case. But the fact is, he killed somebody over this. That's a little above and beyond just a power trip. That is, it's definitely part of the problem. But I want to know if this cop was on something, because this seems far too crazy.
You don't have to be necessarily on something to devalue human life.
True. That's very true.
That's a trait that I think some people can have without any sort of, you know, mind-altering thing.
Yeah, you almost wish as if he was on some sort of drugs or medication, or he was drunk or something.
It would make more sense other than pure hatred.
Yeah, because if he wasn't on any sort of substance, then it was just pure racist hatred that he shot this kid. That's the only reason.
Even if he was on a substance, that's the same thing. It just means that he's probably a little more loose with his tongue, in that if that's the case, or a little less inhibited. So I'm not asking to try and justify this guy or anything like that. And I know you're not implying that, but I just want to clarify that. I'm asking because, to me, given all the stories of cop brutality I've heard in the past several months, this seems above and beyond anything I've seen. And I want to know if he was in a normal state of mind to do too, because
you must have missed the last
even if he was
story
just beat the tar and broke the kid's bones, that would still be terrible. And I would get that.
You must have, Nick, you must have missed the recent story that came out this week. LAPD, the man who shot the other man who was lying on the ground, killed him. You must have missed that one too, because that's another good example of this.
Yeah, but there's no racism left in America. You've got a black president. It's fine now.
That's right. So Hannity and Fox News continue to tell us. It's depressing, man. We move on. To.
Hold on. Hey, before we move on, Jeff, if I could, just a real quick fact check for something that we covered in that segment. The whole thing that spread on the internet about the police chief's wife and going on a kind of a racial tirade and calling blacks feral that we referenced earlier, that's been debunked by PolitiFact as a liar, liar, pants on fire. That's completely untrue, so we just want to kind of correct ourselves on that. And the other thing that just I kind of want to push back on is this wasn't a lynching. This was a little bit worse. Growing up in the part of the country where lynchings kind of gained their notoriety, a lynching is an act of barbarism that's done by people acting outside the law, and the law turns a blind eye. This was done by somebody acting behind the protection of the law. This was done by an officer of the law. This isn't a crime of neglect. This is a crime of power acting badly. And so again, I'm not saying that we are, the Jim Crow South again, but at least in some ways, and this example and many others across the country attest to it. In some ways, there's more dangerous overt racism out there.
Right. And speaking of basically people in power acting badly, we go to our next segment. You like that? Yeah, I figured you would. Speaking of the Ferguson protests, there's been a lot of media coverage, let me start that over here. Speaking of the protests in Ferguson, Missouri, there's been a lot of media coverage on the heavy-handed, almost ham-fisted response to the protesters from the police. And more disturbing accounts have come out from two journalists that were targeted and arrested by the police. Now, two journalists, Wesley Lowery of the Washington Post and the Huffington Post's Ryan Riley, were at a local McDonald's charging up their cell phones and writing up some of their pieces about the coverage of the protests when a SWAT team came in and arrested them, or tried to get them to vacate the area first. And when that SWAT officer came in to try and do that, I believe it was Wes Lowery pulled out his phone and began to record them. We've got some of the video. We're going to look at that. Whoop. Fail.
Stuff. Let's go.
I'm working on it.
Stop videotaping. Let's grab our stuff and go.
Someone right to videotape you, sir?
Hurry up. Let's go.
Please don't make her go to me.
Let's go.
You see me working. Please do not tell me not to use my phone.
Time to go. Let's go.
Please not leave a gun.
We're down about 45 seconds. Let's go.
Now is the street. Can I ask
Let's go. Let's go.
I'm trying to
You
ask.
don't have time to ask questions. Let's go.
Close. Can I move my car?
You can move your car if your car's out here. Let's go.
It is. That's what I was asking. You didn't have time to.
Let's go.
Being me.
Let's go.
I'm working.
Let's go. There's a door over here. Let's go.
I'm gonna watch this.
Let's go. You can move. Let's go. Move.
Sir, please.
Let's move. Let's move.
Sir,
Let's move this way. Here's the door. This way or this way?
All right, so after that clip ended, of course, Lowery actually reported that he was shoved into a soda machine, and then an officer also slammed Riley, his cohort's head, against the glass when they didn't go out the right door. So, as far as I know, I thought recording the police was legal. Didn't seem like they respected that ability to record police very much, now did they? Now here's something that was a little bit more disturbing. Lowery wrote an account about this in the Washington Post, and it went like this. So, quote, "As I turned, my backpack, which was slung over my shoulder, began to slip. I said, 'Officers, let me just gather my bag.' As I did, one of them said, 'Okay, let's take him.' Now this was after the recording was done. Multiple officers grabbed me. I tried to turn my back to them to assist them in arresting me. I dropped my things from my hands." He put his hands behind his back and he said, "My hands are behind my back. I'm not resisting. I'm not resisting." At which point one officer said, "You are resisting. Stop resisting." What are your thoughts on this, Stephen?
It's just, it amazes me, this entire story. It just seems like if the SWAT team kind of needed to clear out that McDonald's for whatever reason, there didn't seem to be a real reason, then they could have approached that a hell of a lot better. Just like, look guys, you're going to need to kind of move, there's a situation. But they came in aggressively, like, right, you've got 45 seconds, let's go, let's go, let's go. It was just harassment, and the whole, like, the fact that the reporter there was trying to cover up his cell phone, because obviously he knew if the if the SWAT team there thought that he was being recorded, then he would have smashed that phone up. You knew that would have happened, and you know the journalists would have been given no respect, kind of no freedom of the press they would have had there. It was atrocious. I mean, in one of the reporters' kind of stories, he says, you know, he constantly asked for that particular SWAT member's ID number or name, and well, I was about to say soldier then. It's a Freudian slip because he was dressed as a soldier. You know, refused to give that name, and they're not legally allowed to do it. If someone asks for their ID number, you have to give it as a form of identification. Otherwise, anyone could kind of pretend to be SWAT. It's just outrageous. And I think the funniest thing as well is that when they were arrested, you know, he talks about how he says, "I wasn't resisting," and then the cops say, "Oh, you are resisting." When both reporters were slung in the back of a police van, there was a member of the clergy in there as well, and he's just thinking, but like, why have they arrested kind of like priests and vicars and stuff? Like, what sort of hassle were they going to be causing the cops? It's just outrageous, this entire scenario.
And another account, basically, after they were arrested, they were in there for a little while. I don't remember how long they were actually in there for. I don't recall that. But they were released without any sort of paperwork, and they were never charged. So they obviously didn't do anything wrong, and were still arrested just for being in a McDonald's. It's complete insanity what's going on here. Journalists getting arrested and shut down for no reason. Once again, you know, you've got, and we'll get into some the more egregious things of what's going on. There have been reports of officers aiming their weapons at peaceful protesters. That's the kind of stuff that they don't want getting out, and so they're going to silence the media. And I was talking to I was actually talking to Tom on one of our fans. He's also got a show on his radio show, Some Say Info. I was talking to him, and we were talking a little bit about this, and something that they said, either he or one of his guests, they didn't give a shit until members of the press were actually arrested, because a lot of these live streamers were also being detained and arrested and things like this. But they didn't give a shit. A lot of people didn't give a shit until the bigger media figures were harassed. So I'm not sure I entirely buy it, but once again, it is kind of funny that they were released without any charges.
Well, I mean,
there are some bloggers and live streamers still in jail.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best quotes is that when I think it was a Los Angeles Times reporter, he found out 2 of his colleagues had been arrested, so he phoned up the police chief, and the police chief found out that he'd arrested 2 prominent reporters. You have the Huffington Post and the Washington Post. They're big names sort of thing. And the police chief's quote was, "Oh, God." He instantly knew that's going to be another massive headache for them. And as soon as he found out, he said that the riot police were from St. Louis County and likely, quote, didn't know any better. And so he instantly knew, arresting prominent reporters, that's going to be a problem. And that's where they were released straight away. You know, I'm sure there probably are some live stream bloggers who are still probably in a holding cell for no good reason. And, okay, there's an argument to be made that bloggers aren't necessarily reporters, and that's a whole different issue. But yeah, you're right that the only reason these 2 were released were because they were prominent journalists.
Yeah, there's a reason I stopped broadcasting from McDonald's. The whole situation, man. Like, we talk about the militarization of police, but seeing that video, it just speaks so much more profoundly than pictures. Even pictures of them like on top of armored personnel carriers, in full gear. Like, when you see it in video, and you've got that sound of what sounds like a mild-mannered officer speaking to another person who sounds just like you. Like, these aren't people like yelling back and forth in different languages in a war zone. Like, these are 2 U.S. citizens talking to one another, and one of them looks like he's out of an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It's completely unreal and baffling. I've always kind of laughed about the beat cops in the UK over on Stephen's home turf. Like, they don't carry deadly weapons. And I've always thought, like, oh man, like that would be just a disaster in America because we've got, you know, so many more armed criminals here than they have over there. But I'm getting to the point now where I'm like, you know what, maybe that's what we need, because police officers are just proving time and time again that they can't be trusted with this stuff. This whole instance, even if what the police officers say is true, and I want to point out two different ways. Okay, let's say the kid did try to steal your gun. He tried to steal your gun and was unsuccessful. Even if what you say is true, you don't shoot someone after you win the scuffle for your gun. You detain them. If he gets the gun, then maybe your partner shoots him, but if he was unsuccessful, why are you firing at the kid? And if what the police chief says is true, oh, you know, those riot cops, they're from the county, they're not from the city police department. Well, okay, let's say that's true. Like, that's how poorly you've debriefed them. Like, they mention the names of two reporters, the police chief immediately goes, oh God, no, and knows, like, this shouldn't have happened. Like, that's how well coordinated this is. These people in, you know, straight up military gear, and some vets have pointed out on Twitter from Bosnia, Afghanistan, and Iraq that these police are much more heavily armed than they ever were on patrol. These guys are walking around patrolling our streets, harassing. These are the people that we've given this much responsibility and weaponry to, and they don't even know how to do their jobs, literally. Like, there's no communication, there's no coordination. It's basically just go keep the black folks in check. Like, you get the feeling that's the only mission these guys have been given, and it's disastrous.
The police chief, he's quoted saying kind of he was urging kind of all the officers and the SWAT teams to kind of abide by the law and kind of not overreact. You shouldn't have to urge the SWAT team. You should be telling them what to do. You don't just say, oh, would you please kindly actually kind of follow and enforce the law that you should be doing. That's part of your job. No, he's just kind of kindly asking them. It's just ridiculous. And just to your kind of point about British cops here, like with the American stereotype of the cop, kind of fat, beer belly, donut eating sort of cop. Over here, hardly any of our cops carry guns. Okay, our SWAT teams, that's a certainty, but most of our on-the-beat cops don't carry a gun. But if you act out, they'll chase you down and they'll beat the shit out of you, sort of thing, but only if you're running away. But they're not going to kill you. That's why they don't have guns. That's why we don't have any cops shooting innocent teenagers. It's just...
Can I just add one point, and it kind of explains a little bit? The reason the cops don't have guns in Britain is because the last time law enforcement was given arms, the king was beheaded and the government was overthrown and replaced by a dictatorship under Oliver Cromwell. That's part of the reason why they don't have guns today. It's because the people completely overthrew a government, and not so that's why law enforcement is not allowed to carry guns. At least it's one of the main reasons behind it and why they're so afraid of changing that rule.
Okay, Sean, let's get back to the story. That
was insulting, sir.
I imagine.
But oh man, I lost my train of thought now because Stephen did point out something that was well, Steve. Okay, so talking about that, like, so yeah, Stephen is quick to point out, like, maybe there are still instances of police brutality in England, but this used to be true even of riot police in the U.S. You know, like in the civil rights era. We grew up with history images of people getting, water cannoned and pushed down and beat on, but that was where it stopped, right? Like the killing, and then obviously there were some police killings. I'm not saying there weren't. Bounds of reason. But generally speaking, this idea of where we're not in quote unquote tumultuous times like we were in the civil rights era, just day to day, the number of police killings that are sketchy or shady, they just keep going up. There's been 2 or 3, this week that have made national news. That's not counting all the ones that didn't make national news.
There's an interesting stat out there, actually, if I could interrupt you for a second there. An interesting stat that I read is that on average there are 28 black men that are killed a day in America, I believe, by police. Now, you can fact check me on that. And I urge you to. If I got that wrong, please let me know.
Well, so
per day.
Back to kind of where I was going with all that is, like, even as scary as it looks, and as much as it still does open the door for overreaction, like, whenever you have cops in riot gear with batons and shields, like, they've got skin in the game, right? Like, they're less likely to overreach and get too aggressive because they're right there. They're within arm's reach. They're face to face with the crowd. whenever you give them armored personnel carriers and sharpshooters and marksmen and put them, 25, 30 yards away from the crowd, and they just train their guns on the crowd, there's no fear of repercussion because they can't fight back. The crowds have no way to defend themselves.
It's about smart policing. I mean, here when we had the riots back in 2012, we had water cannons, we had kind of riot shields and everything that the cops were using, but they didn't have guns. But if you don't have guns, to your point, you have to think about better ways to try and manage people. So there's a tactic that was used here in the UK by the police called kettling, where you just enclose kind of hundreds, possibly thousands of people just into a really small area, and you just contain them there, and you just make them sit there for hours and hours, and they wouldn't be able to leave that spot, and eventually kind of quell down any particular violence that was kicking off. And that was a really effective tactic. But you give someone a gun, you just go, I can point it at them, and that will scare them off. It just takes away any thought away from actually doing their job. That's the issue.
All right, so we're getting more into tactics and armament especially. So I think that's a good segue into our next segment, since this is supposed to be more about the reporters. So we're gonna jump into police, the militarization of the police, when we're talking about how they're armed. So next segment. This is a question that seems to be asked a lot. Comparing different scenes from the protests in Ferguson between war scenes of war. So it's kind of where I got the idea from this. Ferguson or Fallujah? Guess. All right. The protesters in Ferguson, Missouri, were recently met by heavily armed police units. Now, for example, some of the armaments that they had were armored vehicles, marksmen, assault weapons, tear gas, smoke bombs, you name it. Now, we've got a couple of pictures of some of the things that they have, just to give you a look into what the protesters are actually dealing with in Ferguson. Let me go to those right now. All right, so there you have an armored personnel carrier. That's pretty lovely. So they get to go in there with their armored personnel carriers, and then you have this picture, which is really kind of disturbing to me. Marksmen aiming at the people down in the crowd, training their weapons. There have been reports of, like I said, officers training their weapons on peaceful protesters. That should not happen. But those are a couple of pictures of some of the armaments and stuff that they're using. I wasn't really able to get more, but I mean, there you have it. There you have it. Now, one of the things that's remarkable about this is that it looks like something you would see in Iraq or Afghanistan, not Missouri. And what do you guys think so far?
Well, it's especially terrifying because the first rule of gun safety is treat every weapon like it's loaded. The second rule of gun safety is never sweep your muzzle across anything or anyone you don't intend to destroy. Now, to be completely fair, we don't see the other side of the picture to know where the muzzle of that weapon's pointed. It's being reported in multiple articles that weapons are trained on the crowd. I haven't seen any actual, well, I've seen a few pictures of weapons trained on individuals, not so much on the crowd in general. But regardless, like if the way it's being reported is accurate and that marksman has his weapon, he's not at low ready. He is trained. It's on his shoulder. He's ready to fire. Like, that's war zone behavior. That's I've got my target and I'm ready to shoot behavior. So like you've got police officers who not only are they not practicing discretion, they're not practicing like basic firearm safety. These are not people making wise decisions. This is the kind of thing that we insult, dumb rednecks who shoot themselves in the foot, in segments all the time for. And these are what the cops are doing here. And they're doing it with some serious equipment. Like, that's a really nice rifle in that picture. I would like to have that rifle. but I would not use it for the same reasons this gentleman seems to be using it. And then, I mean, I know it's, well, I don't want to jump the gun too much, so I'll yield my time here and come back to my next point later on.
I'll take it up then. It's a very terrifying picture. What's really unsettling for me is from my angle, I rarely see cops who are visible to the public actually training weapons on the public. I can think of only a few examples that come to mind where that's happened, and both of them have ended badly. The first one, technically speaking, happens to be the Boston riots that were kind of one of the reasons you Yanks became a country. The whole thing where or Boston Massacre, that's what it was. Boston Massacre. British soldiers get jumpy and then fire in a crowd and kill, I think, 4 people. The other one I can think of is the shooting at Ohio State in 1968, the one that the Neil Young song is about, where National Guard soldiers wind up getting jittery and fire on the crowd of student protesters. Both cases had soldiers or people training guns on a crowd, and it didn't work out well. But the more important thing for me is this guy is visible. Like, if there's a riot situation, I guarantee you, in probably most riot situations, there probably is law enforcement personnel somewhere pointing guns at the crowd. But they're designated marksmen in, like, Overwatch positions. They're not sitting in trucks watching you pointing guns at your face where you can see them. They're people who are hidden for a reason because it doesn't look good and it tends to make the crowd more upset. But they're there to make sure things don't get out of hand. This is throwing away all pretenses of, oh, let's just make it so the crowd stays calm so they don't think we're trying to, like, target them or something. That pretense is gone. They're directly pointing guns at the crowd, at least based on the pictures we have. That's what, to me, what is more unsettling than anything else is they're not hiding it.
Well, the thing is,
we have another.
Yeah,
sorry,
just before we go on, this might segue nicely.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I may go a bit Jimmy Dore here, but and I don't want to generalize, but a lot of the police officers are just thugs. You know, there are a number of police officers, and it certainly seems in this case in Ferguson, a number of the police officers there seem to be, at least they've been acting thug-ish. And you've given them a whole lot of gadgets with all these new toys, which Jeff's just about to go on. You don't think some of them want to use them? They haven't had a chance to test them out yet in a real-life situation. Somebody wants to pull that trigger. Somebody wants to aim that water cannon. And of course they want to use all the nice gadgets they've been sold to by the military.
And I do have one more picture, actually, that goes to one of the examples that Jordan was talking about, them training weapons on an individual. Take a look at that. So there's another one of the pictures, and obviously that's one of the protests. Part of the whole protest there were crowds of African American people raising their arms up and saying, "Don't shoot me," as they would approach the cops. Just, "Don't shoot me, don't shoot me." They would chant. So, I mean, there's a good picture of that right there, and you can see. Once again, it looks like something out of a war zone.
It does. We should point out, though, at least a few of those weapons are paintball guns. Those are not all
for pepper balls, yeah.
Well, yeah,
and there's also rubber bullets. They're not using real bullets.
Yeah, but
we hope.
Yeah, you hope so. The person with their hands up there doesn't know that they're firing rubber bullets. They're assuming maybe. But even a rubber bullet fired from, I mean, you can't work out the exact distance there. But a rubber bullet, you know, fired from 30 meters or whatever, if that hits you in the head or kind of catches you at a funny angle, that could still kill you. It could cause internal bleeding from a short distance. Those things hurt. You know, you look at all reports of people who have been shot by them. They can do some serious damage. They're still not kind of unlethal weapons. They can still kill.
Oh, absolutely. And that's another thing. Like, until pretty recently, those rubber bullets were not real easy to find for the general public. You can get them now. But for that reason, because they were afraid people would treat them like toys, you know, they would see that less than lethal classification, and, you know, kids would go out and have rubber bullet fights. They didn't let them out to the public. And there's a very good reason for that. Like, the police just recently, within the past year or so, have killed people with these things. They're not toys, and these are cops who know they're dealing with an unarmed populace, or at least a largely unarmed group of people. And you know, they're out there playing Call of Duty, man. And if somebody gets hurt, you know, who cares?
Yeah, and they're throwing things like tear gas, which, from what I've read, I believe it's also, and I'm not entirely sure, but I think I read that this was tear gas was banned by international law.
No, it's not. It's legal by international law. Someone posted in the chat, and I read it too. This is the funny part, though. It falls under the classification that's within the 1925 Geneva Convention gas protocol, saying that gas poisonous and other types of gas weaponry are prohibited for use in warfare. So it technically falls under that classification, but because it is a less than lethal weaponry, it's fair game for law enforcement. And arguably, I think the main reason why it's not used in warfare is because, are you really trying to just blind someone in warfare? No, you're trying to kill them. What point is tear gas in that case? It's not like mustard gas where you're going to slowly kill somebody over a long period of time. It's designed to disperse crowds and I guess temporarily disable individuals, but you're not really concerned about that in a war setting. So people have been posting that it's technically under that classification, but I think even in war it would slide if anyone cared to use it, but they don't, because when you're in war you kind of want to kill your enemy. You don't really want to tear gas them. So
yeah,
I would jump in.
So that's a bit more nuanced then.
It's a lot like white phosphorus. They're technically chemical weapons, but they've not been enforced as illegal. And I also just too want to throw out, like, that's shaky ground whenever we start saying, like, oh, the police are using this stuff and the army won't even use it. Oh, the army also can't use hollow point or fragmenting rounds. They can only use full metal jacket. You don't want cops using full metal jacket. You want cops using hollow point and fragmenting rounds. So, like, it's a different thing. So the fact that something's illegal in war doesn't necessarily mean it's brutal for police work.
All right,
and I mean, keep in mind the case with white phosphorus is that if it lands on you, it will melt through you too. So that's also almost a different beast from tear gas entirely, because if that thing gets on you, it's not going to stop burning until it's burned a hole right through you. So.
All right. So, I mean, we have an example of the kind of armaments and things that these police officers, as so-called keepers of the peace, right, are using. So the question is, how did the police get so well armed? Well, I have some information on that. And for that, we go to an article in Salon. Now, they explain, quote, the Ferguson Police Department is part of a federal program, Federal Program 1033, that distributes hundreds of millions of dollars of surplus military gear to police forces across the country. So they're sending military-grade weaponry and gear over to police forces. Now, they have the motto of, from warfighter to crime fighter. That sounds interesting, right? In theory, but in practice, obviously, you see some of the issues going on here. Now, according to the program's website, the 1033 program has redistributed more than $4.3 billion worth of property since it began in 1997. And almost $500 million worth of property just last year. The most money ever given as part of this program. But that's kind of weird, because we have well, I guess it's not, because we do have a lot of gear and stuff returning from the wind down in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it makes sense that they've got all this gear coming back, and now they want to do something with it. And they're giving it to our police department. It's a bit of a problem. So, I mean, you guys see the problem here?
I mean, it's an amazing problem. I think people probably aren't quite aware that they probably just think, oh, maybe, I don't know what people are thinking. I would expect, if I found out that my local police force, had spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars, buying an armored personnel carrier, or, a batch full of kind of sniper rifles, what have you, I'd be outraged. I'd say, pay for a few more cops on the beat, or, spend a bit more money on training your cops properly to do their actual job. That it's just the amount of money that has been wasted. I mean, okay, you could say, all this extra equipment is, would just be going to waste anyway. You've already got thousands of tanks going to waste in the desert. Just put some more stuff there. The military-industrial complex is already overproducing. There's more supply than demand for this stuff, and so that's why they're looking for new markets to try and sell all of this extra gear. It's just the amount of money that's been spent militarizing American police forces it's astronomical. It's astounding.
Yeah, it's very, very problematic. Now, one of the major problems that I see is basically how police funding seems to work. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to police budgets, you get funding for the things that you need. And if you don't need it, don't use it, you don't get funded for it. Now, in most circumstances, police forces in a small town don't need an APC or a tank, as some people would say it. So, in the end result, but they'll use it, right? So in the end result, not only are you using it, but they're going to get more funding for more of this stuff. And all it takes is a protest. All it takes is some small thing, and then you've got a reason for people to break out the tanks and the assault rifles, or not just assault rifles, full-on, automatic weapons. Even if they're shooting rubber bullets, they're still automatic weapons. And so you've got all of this stuff going on here, and a lot of this stuff is designed for war. But you're not supposed to be at war. It's a war on the American people, is what it seems like it's becoming.
What I tend to feel is that there's no accountability. It seems that police chiefs have this budget. If they have $1 million to spend, kind of per year, and it gets around to kind of December time, and they've got $100,000 they'll have to go, oh, well, I've got to spend it on something, otherwise they'll decrease my budget for next year. Sorry, I'll get an APC, I'll get kind of a rocket launcher, or whatever they want. There's no accountability. They need to have someone kind of saying, oh, I see last year you spent kind of X number of dollars on an armored personnel carrier. How many times have you used it? Did you really need it, sort of thing? They just seem to be able to buy whatever the hell they want. They can just go on a mad shopping spree using the taxpayers' money. It's amazing.
Because it helps the defense contractors that ultimately make money on this stuff, creating military equipment. And then that military equipment finds its way into the hands of police who aren't, I mean, they may be trained to know how to actually operate it, but that's not where you want your military equipment to go.
See, here's the thing. I just want to jump in with this one point quickly. Sorry, Jordan. From my understanding, a lot of police budgets are actually kind of low. They're not as extensive as a law enforcement would like. And so maybe I'm wrong with that, and you guys can clarify. So what this really seems like to me is them going, oh my God, equipment we can use, and it's not going to be as expensive as perhaps we might otherwise need. Let's take it. And they don't, at least at first maybe, they didn't really realize how bad it looks when you're driving an APC down the street that has the words police on the side. That's a little excessive to everybody else around you, and they kind of get scared and angry because it looks like you're preparing for war, when that might not have been your intention at the start, but it looks really, really bad. Yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, I don't blame the police. Well, for the actions, for the context that we're in here, obviously I blame the police departments and police departments around the country for that. But in terms of them acquiring this equipment, that I don't really blame them for, because, like you said, they've got a limited budget and they're getting a great deal on it. I guess the closest gripe you could have is say, oh, why don't you invest that money in better training for your officers or education or whatever. But the downside of that is they're not getting the great deal on training and education. They're getting a great deal on the equipment. So from a pure, dollars and cents administrative standpoint, if you get a good deal and you've got the money for it, you don't want to pass it up. So the problem here is with the military-industrial complex, like Steven said, they're overproducing. They've made so much crap that we haven't gone to enough wars to use it all, and they've lobbied their buddies to, hey, well, the government's already paid them what the government price for it is. Turn around, sell it on the cheap, to these people. The complex still gets its money, and the other problem this creates is like this demonstrates a breakdown of both political ideologies. This is why we should kind of unite against this, because if you're a small government, like, God, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I wish Sean was here. because I want to ask him. Like in the libertarian fantasy world, it's always the jackbooted feds who come after you, and your local sheriffs and police departments step up and fight for their community. Well, that ain't the case. In this situation, sure, they're getting this free stuff from the, or not free stuff, but good price stuff from the feds, but these are the local guys causing the problems. So it's a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're saying kind of the police aren't really to blame because they're getting such a good deal on them. It'd be like saying, if there was an amazing deal on cassette tapes and the police bought kind of 800,000 cassette tapes, it's like, oh, okay, you got a good deal, but you don't need the cassette tapes.
No. Stephen, what he means is in the sense of as if, like, imagine in your scenario they did need the cassette tapes or something like the cassette tapes, maybe a lesser version of the cassette tapes, and then they were offered high quality cassette tapes at a good deal. That's what Jordan's kind of meaning, and that's what I'm kind of meaning. It's quality sort of equipment. It's well over what they need, but it's probably better than anything else they'd get otherwise, and better than what they'd like to have otherwise. So they think it's a good deal in that sense. But at the same time, it comes with the baggage of looking terrible and being highly military.
It's not a matter of what they'd like to have. It's a matter of what they kind of need. They shouldn't.
Right. No. But I think this again goes back to what I was saying, though, Stephen. I think a lot of police departments feel they don't have what they need, and this was a way to get more than what they need in a way that looks terrible.
There are needs that police departments have, and so they've got the option of doing things that we would argue would be better at meeting that need, but are out of the scope of their budget, or they get handed this solution that looks good, looks pretty, looks shiny, and history has bore out over the past few years is not at all what they actually need, but it's what they can get. And then also, just to be completely fair, again, what the police officers are doing here, that is their fault. I'm not saying don't blame them for that. I'm just, if you in a vacuum, the sheer aspect of getting a great deal on equipment that could potentially be beneficial, I'm not going to fault them for. It's still a problem. I'm just saying they're not the ones to blame. But there is a need for stuff like this occasionally, right? Like for maybe a well-trained unit that you occasionally deploy. What you don't do is, what we've seen is, the number of SWAT raids is increased. Also, the number of police brutality at protest has not only increased, but it's increased unfairly. The more black people there are to protest, the more likely things are to turn violent from the police. But this is a reflective of a problem, not just with local police, but with our values as a country. Like that, we are perfectly fine with our federal government subsidizing local police abuse, but if the government wanted to spend money on training or education for these police officers, we'd be up in arms over the budget.
Now, Jordan, you say that there are situations where they would need these, and I would make the argument that no, there isn't any situation that the local police would need armored personnel carriers and sniper rifles. Okay, if you have a major problem like that, I think that's what the National Guard is there for. And so I would argue that you already have things in place. You don't need to militarize the police to do
it's the middle road is what Steven's saying. That's what specialized SWAT teams that are only deployed when they actually need to be deployed are for. You don't want to turn the National Guard into your police force because, one, logistically it's not possible.
No. You keep the police force as your police force. I'm not saying get rid of the SWAT team itself.
Jeff's saying the armaments are more what you need for in a military situation, and that's what you have the National Guard for, so you don't need it with the police. And that's totally fair, that's right. But for the police who think that they're very woefully under budget and understaffed and under-equipped, they're handed things that are well beyond what they need, but they still fit that criteria, they're going to take it. And I mean, that's the only point I'm making. I'm not saying it's right. I've been trying to make very clear that it's very wrong, but there's a mentality there for them that they believe that they are horrendously under-equipped, and while this is definitely excessive, it's better than being under-equipped to them, so they take it. And the problem is how that looks to the public and the possible mental effects that has on the soldiers. See? Slip of the tongue, I meant police, but I said soldiers, because they look like it and they'll start feeling like it. Which, by the way, any professionally trained military don't think they're going to be pointing guns at on a crowd like this.
You know what I forgot to say, and that's a good points and stuff. But I actually forgot to say that we should we could take tweets hashtag TYT Community. So we could take your tweets in the middle of the show if you have like a comment in the story on what we're doing, or if you want to ask a question later on for a Q&A. We definitely want more audience interaction. So I mean, tweet me at Just Politics, or use the hashtag TYT Community, and I mean, send us your thoughts on these. But I think that's a good sort of thing to end this whole thing on. To end the whole thing on Ferguson and go do something a little bit different. There is other news and stuff happening, so I want to go to a little bit of that. Now, if you work, it stands to reason that you're going to get paid for actually doing the work, doing something, right? Well, that is, of course, unless you work in Congress. Now, the 113th Congress now is by far the least productive, highest paid Congress in history. Even worse than the original do-nothing Congress. So you have to stretch way far back, and even then, you've got to beat. Now, this comes as no surprise, right? 2013, Congress took about 239 days off for vacation, and when they were there, they really weren't doing anything. Now, vacations aside, how much are they getting paid? Well, how much are they getting paid for doing next to nothing when they're there and not being there? About $174,000 a year, which, by the way, there are certain congressmen that do complain about that. Stephen, I think you have a good example, so we'll have to throw to you in a minute here, but when you look at the pay for performance, there was an excellent graph that showed just how much they get paid per bill that's passed. Our current Congress, the 113th, gets paid about $4,368 per bill passed. This year so far, Congress passed about 91 bills, but in 2013 it was about 72. So here they are, they're still getting paid a lot and not doing a lot. What do you think?
It's really an embarrassment. It's just the fact that they're saying it's Representative Lee Terry of Nebraska, Republican, of course. You know, he's been saying kind of Congress can't afford a kind of a pay freeze or a pay cut because the last salary increase occurred 6 years ago. That was a $5,000 increase, I believe. But you know, that amount of money and saying, oh no, we still need some more because we're doing such good work. It's like, as you pointed out, they're doing no work. I mean, they call kind of students. You have, you know, particularly kind of right-wing Republicans, kind of students are lazy, Latinos are lazy, blacks are lazy. No, they've actually got jobs and are working. Nearly all of them. It's the Congress who are doing absolutely bugger all. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think there's a funny kind of reverse trajectory here, where U.S. employee wages are stagnant at a point where they rarely are in history, while employee production is at an all-time high. Whereas Congress, their production to pay level is the exact opposite, and we're paying more for less actual work. I do want to throw out just a few caveats because I'm the most fair man in America, exactly. What Congress gets paid is like where their staff budget comes out of. So that's a lot of what these guys are asking for. They don't really need this money because, as we now know, most of congressmen, Democrat or Republican, are millionaires from their private sector dealings. So like what we pay them is really, it's what they need because they're too greedy to pay out of their own pocket for their staff. So just, again, it doesn't completely absolve them, but regardless of what you do with the money, if I'm paying you money, you should do some work. And then, of course, we also want to point out that the number of bills passed does not necessarily equal what you want out of Congress, because let's keep it real, if the Republicans passed every bill they want, we'd be in disastrous times. I'm not saying that stopping every bill for the sake of stopping it is much better. But just again, just to get the full perspective out there.
I'll get into that little talking point in a minute here, but Nick.
I just wanted to jump in quickly and say that basically along the same lines about how they don't need money, they also don't need money because when they're not in office doing stuff, even those the millionaires and even those who aren't millionaires in Congress are fundraising. You don't really need to worry so much about expenses in situations like that. That's either being taken care for you, or it's kind of part of the deal. So I'm not. Yeah.
I mean,
that
this
money is not too much.
This is the point I was going to make, is that kind of these congressmen, saying, oh, we're only earning $174,000 a year. To them, in the circles that they run in, because they're hanging around with multimillionaires, with billionaires, fundraising, they feel poor within their own social circle, within their bubble. They're the poorest of the poor. Okay, their staff is maybe a little bit below them, but that's why they feel that they need a pay increase, because in their social circle, they're poor. It's just part of their mindset. That's the problem. They're not hanging around with local people, kind of grocery store clerk or kind of the local kind of bank manager or something like that at your local outlet. They're hanging around as multimillionaires, and so to them, $174,000 a year is nothing. I mean, the Representative Lee Terry, he was saying, I already give 10% of my entire wage away to charity. I'm already giving back to the community, and I can't afford to give any more. And he said, he refused to give some of his salary last year when other lawmakers in his state did. And he said, God bless them. But you know what? I've got a nice house and a kid in college, and I'll tell you, we cannot handle it. Giving our paycheck away when you still worked and earned it, that's just not going to fly. It's like, oh, you've got a kid in college. Oh, you've got a nice house. Oh, well, poor you. Millions of people don't own their own house. They can't afford to send their kid to college. It's just, they're completely bereft of any sympathy or awareness of what the average person goes through.
Going back to the fundraising angle that Nick brought up, it's not just when they're gone on vacation are they out there going to like fundraisers and parties and everything like that. They also spend about 4 hours a day when they're in Congress fundraising. So they're stuck in a nonstop fundraising loop, essentially. And that's really the sad fact about our current post-Citizens United, post-Buckley-Vallejo political, candidacy cycle, is that we're stuck. Our legislators are stuck in fundraising mode 365 days a year. And so, of course, they're not going to do our business. They're going to do the business of the wealthy donors. And what are the wealthy donors? Well, they're mostly bankers that don't want anything passed. They don't want regulation. They're not going to have anything passed, right? And also, oil tycoons. They obviously don't want anything done. They love status quo. Basically, the ones that are the richest got rich off the status quo, and so they don't want to change that. And there's the conservative argument, and you hear this a lot from Republicans. John Boehner famously said, well, you don't get judged on how many laws you make. You get judged on how many laws that you repeal. Well, okay, so there, in a certain argument, to be completely fair, there are some laws that may be redundant, right? But in order to repeal a law, you actually have to pass a law that repeals that law. So you actually have to be passing something, right? And conservatives, I mean, they certainly have tried to do that approach. With one law in particular, I'll give you a hint to guess what that is, which one they've been trying to repeal. But it just shows that their priorities, they don't match up to passing legislation. They just don't want to do it because it's not a priority. It's not a priority for them, and it certainly isn't a priority to their donors. Did I just do a drop the mic moment or something?
Walk off screen right now, Jeff. Do it. That's lazy. That doesn't work. Damn it, Jeff. We got to do the whole show again now.
Damn it, Jim. I'm a doctor, not a... Oh, wait. I'm not a doctor.
I nearly am.
Well, I'll just end it with this then. And the whole problem is that Congress is supposed to work for us, but they don't, right? Like I said, Republicans and their donors, they don't want new laws unless it's to do things like police vaginas, give tax cuts for the rich, or repeal certain regulation. And, things like food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, all that sort of thing. Now, Democrats obviously will block some of these social programs because, hey, guess what? They're popular, and it would hurt them in the polls. So they don't do anything. They go and block that. So that prevents legislation either from being enacted or repealed. That's why we have the stalemate. That's why we have, in 2013, only 72 bills being passed. Usually it's probably the ones that they both agree on, both of their donors, certain tax cuts, certain breaks for certain corporations, that sort of thing. But you don't get anything that helps you and I. And that's the fundamental problem. And I think that's why you have to get money out of politics. Yes, obligatory wolf-pack.com. Get money out of politics because you're going to continue to see more of this. And definitely, I see some agreement from the panel. So we'll move on. Another quick story. Goofy Republicans. Start now.
Woo!
Don't get offended by this, because it's not what you're thinking, Jordan. A Mississippi Tea Party leader held an interesting opening prayer during an event where he pretty much called upon God to be violent against the GOP establishment. Oh, how nice. Now, Talking Points memo writes that a Tea Party group co-founder named Royal Nicholson made these comments at a speaking event, and this same guy has a history of invoking God's wrath to people he generally dislikes. For example, he once called on God to save the United States from the criminal invaders in the federal government, and that's after the Supreme Court upheld Obamacare. Criminal invaders, Obamacare. I don't quite get how healthcare reform, health insurance will do enough to invoke God's wrath. I don't quite get the whole thing. But he had said, quote, may all of us fall on our faces before the heavenly judge, repent our sins, and humbly cry out to him for mercy on our country, and may godly, courageous leaders rise up in his wisdom, power to lead us in displacing the criminal invaders from their seats and restore our constitutional republic, which, by the way, is a secular constitutional republic. I don't think you got that memo. So it's kind of a nice mental read on this gentleman. This guy apparently thinks that calling on God to strike someone down is akin to calling an airstrike in Call of Duty. Now, I think it's obvious where I'm going to go on this one, who I'm going to call on first. Jordan, what do you think of this guy? Does he have the God delusion?
Man, he's definitely got some self-delusion. This is just a beautiful example, and hear me out on why I say this situation is beautiful, of the state of current, not just conservative politics, I guess, to be fair, but politics in general. But all right, so the quote unquote father of the Republican Party, obviously he wasn't, but the guy who Republicans point to as their first go-to guy, Abraham Lincoln, was almost questioned by this guy in his time. I'm sure most of you have heard this story before, but there's a great book by Francis B. Carpenter that was published right after Lincoln died. And there's an account of a meeting that Lincoln had with a clergyman of the day who said, basically something to the effect of, I hope that God's on our side, or how do you know that God's on our side? Talking about what Lincoln was fighting, everything Lincoln was doing to hold the Union together and to abolish slavery. And Lincoln's reply was, I'm not at all concerned about that, for I know that the Lord is always on the side of the right. But my constant anxiety and prayer that I and this nation should be on the Lord's side. Like, he's not worried about God being on his side. He's worried about him being on God's side. And this guy is going from a completely different angle. Like, I don't like you. I want God to smite you. Like that's the caliber of men that we've fallen from, and this is who we're stuck with. Now, to be fair, this guy's not in public office, but let's keep it real. He's a Tea Party founder. He's involved in the super PAC race or super PACs and all that kind of stuff. Like, this guy might be more powerful than a lot of the people in public office. And for the days of Lincoln, man, for the days of Lincoln.
It's just another... theater business does not wish for the days of Lincoln, sir. But I digress.
True that. I mean, it's just another case of a right-wing loony who has no grasp of what the Constitution actually entails. Just Constitution, and I want that to mean whatever I want it to mean. Same probably when he interprets the Bible, and just like my question to him is, he wants God to enact some sort of violence on the establishment GOP. One, what does he actually mean by establishment GOP? I mean, I assume that he means John Boehner, but who else? What does he consider establishment? And also, what does he mean by violence? I mean, is he actually wishing people dead, or does he just want them to drop out of politics? I mean, by violence, it almost seems like he's wishing people to die. He's inciting violence. Police should maybe look into him a bit.
Yeah, that seems rather, I don't know, unchristian of him, don't you think?
Well, and this is
violence upon someone else.
This is indicative of. I know I'm the guy who always likes to bring up the same theme over and over, but I've only mentioned this one a couple times in previous episodes, so I don't mind doing it again. But this is what happens with reactionary movements, right? So the Tea Party, at least in its very, very early inception, was a reaction, whether or not we agree with the reaction, but to a real problem. Like the economy was bad, debt was running up. These were people who valued, a balanced budget, yada, yada, yada. But then it gets down in places like Mississippi, where the state's as red can be to begin with, but reactionary movements still have to react. So instead of reacting against actual government waste, which we will all agree, even as progressives, does exist, it reacts against the most moderate to conservative things because that's what it has. It's the same thing that fundamentalism Christianity, which started out as an intellectual movement in the North, did when it came south, where it reacted against conservative Christianity and became crazy. And this is what's going on here. So there's no crazy Democrats for them. There's no, raging leftists for this guy to get angry at. So he's calling on God to smite Republicans because why?
Because they're not right-wing enough. That's essentially what this boils down to. This is the same race between two Republicans who are very close in both political leanings and political affiliation and political stances, and in their actual races themselves. So the Tea Party guy and his supporters view the establishment guy as the root of all evil, which is kind of surprising to us progressives because we thought we were no. We're like, that's like saying Hitler. That's like saying Hitler didn't like the British in sorry, no, that's a bad example. Hitler didn't like the Bolsheviks, and the Jews are like, oh, I thought he didn't like us. No, they dislike us all very much equally. So don't worry about that part.
Okay, I was going to say that if the Tea Party starts hating establishment Republicans more than us progressives, that's going to hurt my feelings. It's going to make me sad because I'm like, wait a minute. I am much more hateable than that GOP establishment guy.
It's a case of horse shit and cow shit arguing who's the smelliest shit. Essentially, you can't polish either of these turds. And if this guy, I mean, nothing kind of God isn't actually going to come down and smite anyone. Maybe he does sincerely believe it. I sincerely hope not. But if, or when nothing actually happens, which it won't, does he think that's a failure on his part because he hasn't been praying enough, or is it because the establishment has been praying against him for divine protection, or what does he think is going to happen? You can't argue against illogical things that people are saying. There's no point. He's an illogical, stupid man.
Yeah, he just wants to. He's hoping that he can call down the holy airstrike or the holy hand grenade or something like that. And I got news for you. That's probably not going to happen. It's a nutter. So that's about all that you can say about this guy. Moving on. Last story of the night. Just to let everybody know, we are doing a little bit of a Q&A, so ask your questions. You can either put them in the chat or you can tweet them at us. Tweeting is a little bit easier for me because I can the chat kind of scrolls by pretty fast. Yeah. So if you tweet at me, I can see it a little bit easier. Yes. But like I said, you can do either or if you don't have a Twitter.
But if you have questions for me, keep posting them in the chat. I like that I'm getting several questions, and I will save them here because I don't have a Twitter.
There you go. All right. Last story of the night. This should be another goofy Republican to lighten the mood. Major anti-LGBT group in Texas has teamed up with Attorney General Greg Abbott to try and ban same-sex marriage. Well, that's not surprising at all. But the leader of this group is a man called Jonathan Saenz. Now, Saenz is a social conservative. The social conservative that believes in the Texas values of freedom. Unless, of course, you're gay and want to marry. Little caveat there. Now he says, quote, if you redefine marriage and open the definition to where it's not one man, one woman, how do you have any limitations? How do you stop polygamy? How do you stop people that want to do that with their own family members, their stepchildren? So he's saying that if you open it up to same-sex couples getting married, then that's just gonna it's the classic conservative trope of man on, man on child, man on dog, etc., right? But don't worry, gay people. He doesn't hate you. In fact, his heart breaks for you. Quote, my heart breaks for you if you're currently choosing to live a sinful sexual lifestyle while also trying to convince others that it is also okay to live a sinful lifestyle. You can make a decision today to go and sin no more. It's not too late. Never too late. Well, odds are his heart is broken over something, but it's not same-sex marriage. Because documents obtained by Lone Star Q, that's an LGBT publication in Texas, revealed that Jonathan Saenz' ex-wife divorced him recently, 2011, because he was dating another woman.
I really wish we had an applause track geared up for that, because I love it. I love it.
In 2011, she filed for divorce, his ex-wife. In less than 6 months later, Saenz became the president of the anti-LGBT group, Texas Values. Coincidence?
I mean,
what do you think?
It's just amazing. This story has so much, just the irony that's involved. I mean, he's been saying, homosexuality is kind of it's sinful, where it's a choice, and they've chosen this lifestyle. Well, it turns out that your ex-wife has chosen to go with a woman rather than your ignorant asshole kind of self. It's like he's obviously just a man filled with hate. He's obviously exceedingly bitter that he obviously can't satisfy that woman. I mean, one could make the case that he turned her lesbian. His ignorant, tiny views and his tiny cock has turned his ex-wife into a lesbian. It's brilliant.
Stephen, I love you. Thank you for saying this stuff. Oh my goodness. I can barely take this story seriously. I'll just say one serious point to go along with what Stephen said. That, yeah, think about how that would be for his state of mind. He thinks it's a sinful lifestyle, and then his wife, the woman he married and wanted to dedicate his life to, left him for that sinful lifestyle. She would rather be in that sinful lifestyle that he doesn't like than be with him. Ouch! From his perspective. Ouch!
Right here, right in the feels, man.
Now, the part where I'm done being serious is I want to see the video of how that meeting went down when his wife suddenly decided to be not straight. Because I guarantee you it had lots of funky music and women going, all men are assholes, honey. Come here.
Sean. Okay, so, Jordan, one quick point. And then
Strike two.
More details.
I really don't want to get in this guy's personal life, man. You can go on with the rest.
Okay, more details. Now, this guy isn't done yet. Now, this is why it's revenge of the Sains. According to Raw Story, Jonathan Sains initially asked the court to refuse to grant the divorce and to bar, quote, any unrelated adult with whom the parent has an intimate, romantic, emotional, and or dating relationship to remain in the presence of the children, including but not limited to the ex-wife's girlfriend. Now, Sains also filed a counter-petition for divorce on May of 2013, accusing Corinne Sains, the wife, of adultery. The petition also asked that the girlfriend be permanently barred from access to the children. So it's not just a domestic fight. It's not just the thing about just him. And that's why this story is important. It's not about godliness. It's about revenge. And it's not just about revenge for the wife. It's revenge on the entire LGBT culture. That's why this is important. It's not just an attack on this guy who's a goofball, right? Who's a goofball, idiot, Republican, conservative. It's that he's using his power. He's taking his revenge out not only on his wife, but on the entire Texan LGBT community by teaming up and becoming president of this group, Texas Values, which ultimately has to have some sort of political influence in the state. He is taking his anger out, his vengeance out for being wrong. And look, I understand this guy's probably hurt, and he's lashing out in vengeance, and he's going to use his vengeance against her to hurt an entire community. And that really is the intolerable part.
It's so petty and small-minded. Like, he doesn't, I mean, just kind of the personal revenges against kind of his ex-wife and the ex-wife's new girlfriend. I don't want my kids kind of being involved in that. It's like, well, your ex-wife has risen your kids. I mean, let's be a bit more clear. The wife is probably bisexual. I mean, all sexuality is on a scale, and obviously, kind of, she slept with him. She's had kids with him, so she's not full-on lesbian. She's probably somewhere edging towards women, and she's obviously, I hope, well, one assume that she's raised the kids, sensibly. They're probably fine, decent kids, but he doesn't want his kids now being raised in a purely female-dominated household, because apparently all of a sudden his ex-wife isn't going to be able to raise them properly, or this new partner is going to somehow influence them negatively. It's so petty and small-minded. If I were the judge, I'd go...
Again, the beliefs and the beliefs of the group he now heads is against, like I said, same-sex marriage. It's the same thing that the same thing that these people tend to point out. It's sinful. It destroys the family. It does all these terrible things, and we're going to oppose it at every turn. We're going to use our power to oppose it at every turn. And also, this guy's also in favor of the harmful ex-gay therapy, okay, which has been proven to harm people and children even. That's why this is important. This story is not just about ripping this guy, which, yeah, he deserves a little bit of ripping here and there, but it's not about ripping him in his personal life. It's about him taking his personal life and putting it on a political stage and saying that just because I don't think that it's right, it means that I get to use my power and my standing to influence our politicians into passing laws that hurt regular people, that take away freedom from LGBT people and communities, because I'm angry, because I'm hurt. And that's what's wrong.
Right, and that is wrong. But keep in mind for this guy, and I think it's something kind of important to think about too, if he kept it private to himself and didn't make it a political issue for him, and grandstand it, and try and actually actively oppose homosexuality in public office and politics, I would probably let this go. For one reason. For this guy, homosexuality ruined his marriage. I mean, it's not his wife's fault that she felt that way, and it's not really, well, maybe it is his fault for pushing her away. We don't know the details of that, but technically speaking, yeah, because she was attracted to the opposite sex, his marriage ended. I mean, And maybe she would have left him for another dude if she hadn't felt that way anyway. So who knows? But to this guy, this did end his marriage. This did destroy his personal life. So I would be understanding for him to feel that way, however wrong it is, personally. The part where you're right and where we highlight that he's crossed the line is when he tries to drag it into politics. That's the problem.
Right. Like he's totally. I think he totally has the right to be hurt. I'd be hurt in his position too. But what you don't do is you don't take your personal pain and try to inflict that same pain on other people. Just because he lost his marriage, he wasn't able to stay married to the person that he loves, doesn't mean he gets to ruin everyone else's marriage or ruin the prospects of two people who are the same sex from being able to get married to each other. I just don't think that's right.
He's a vengeful, petty man, and I personally wish him nothing but ill will and sentiment to all of his future relationships. He's also a hateful man. He hates anything that he doesn't consider normal. He should just leave politics and just not try and influence anyone else's lives. Let everyone live their own life. You cocked up your marriage, maybe a poor turn of phrase. Obviously, he wasn't cocking up his marriage, so to speak, and he's just he's a hateful man who everyone should just start ignoring.
On that, we're all in agreement.
All right. Well, Jordan's essentially blocked the segment. He is pulled a Congress on us, but that's okay. If he doesn't want to weigh in, that's his.
No, he hasn't pulled a Congress yet until he sues you for not doing enough on the panel show.
Yeah. Good point. All right. So that's it for our stories. Let's go back to magic of green screen. Oh, my arm's gone. Oh my god. Anyway, having too much fun with that. That's it for the main portion of the show. It's a little bit shorter than usual. I hope you guys enjoyed that part of the show. We're going to continue to refine and make it better, make the segments a little smoother, a little tighter. Doing the best we can to make a much better show for you guys. I want to thank you guys for coming out and watching. You guys have your questions now. We're going to do some Q&A here. So you guys have been tweeting questions.
I'd just like to jump in.
Facebook.
Can I just?
I'm sorry. You ask questions in the YouTube chat, which also works. So we're going to get to that. Who wants to be the question guy for today? We should have probably deliberated this in advance. Nope.
Hey Jeff, how about you be the question guy?
I'm always the question guy. So what are the questions here? These are you've got these in the chat here, right?
Yeah, right. Some, and there are some I saved into our sidebar that the audience can't see, and because I wanted to address them personally. And there's one I want to address first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. While I'm looking at the others.
Okay. So this was something I actually wanted to talk about tonight anyway. I was going to fit it in with the police segment part, but Jamie asked a question, and I think it fits in perfectly here. His question was, is this the start of a revolution over inequality and injustice? And other people have said similar things, both in the chat and on various media platforms lately, if not about this, then about things with Israel, Palestine, and stuff. Now, I recognize that within the context of the question, he's referring specifically to the United States, so I'll address it in that sense. You really need to be very careful what you define as the start of a revolution, okay? Do you mean just pushing for equality? And I asked him, and Jamie elaborated more, and he's pushing for that. So that's fine. But there are other people who are pushing further. They're pushing for the entire dismantling of the system as we have it and know it today to be replaced by something else. They haven't really said. They don't really know because apparently they haven't thought that far ahead. Here's why I think that is absolutely terrifying and dangerous. Because we've tried that before. There's a reason I've gone through for my master's in history is so I can actually track this stuff because it fascinates me. The last time every time in history where we try and overthrow and replace old orders and old systems with new ones, it doesn't work that way. Eventually, often the old systems come back, or newer ones that are basically the same thing emerge. You have to understand that when you're advocating for something like that, what you create is a lot of chaos. And some people say, good, chaos is great. But chaos doesn't work the way you think it does. Chaos still has some rules and orders, if you will. In a situation of chaos, money is still money to a lot of people. And a lot of people will follow money and use money to exert influence. So while, yeah, you get rid of the old establishment guys, the old order, those aren't the ones you need to be that afraid of in a situation of chaos. The ones you need to be afraid of are the really ambitious guys waiting in the wings, biding their time for a chance. And we've seen it several times. We saw it in the French Revolution, where the people swept through, they disposed the old monarchs. Guess what emerged in their place? You had 3 successive regimes of rather brutal or really ineffectual congresses, if you will. And then you had Napoleon, an absolute dictator, but not a king, an emperor, because we couldn't use king because that would be the same thing and then everyone would be wise. So we were an emperor instead. That's what happens when you create a power vacuum like that, and when the people rise up and there's no set plan. That's what happened in Soviet Russia. That's what happens in lots of places. So you really need to be very careful about what you're advocating for, because I absolutely guarantee you, every revolution in history has worked out the same way, where it starts off with set goals, it gets carried along far too extreme, and gets pulled back, and then eventually it's sometimes pulled back so far that it's the old order again with different faces. So anyone who's advocating for this entire dismantling of the system and stuff, you're wrong. It's not the right approach. The system we have for a reason, because it helps the greatest number of people with the least amount of pain to those it doesn't help. Okay? That's largely what we've strived to do all throughout history, all throughout society. What we need to do is fix that system, because it is broken right now, and we're right to point that out. But you don't, if it's fixable, and it is, you don't throw it away, because I'm promising you, the solution, that's not the solution. That will only make things worse. All right, I'm done.
All right, so question from Tom. There's a question from Tom, and then I want to get a question from, I believe it was either Ava or Lucy from the chat. But first, let's answer Tom's question. He tweeted that in. He asked, and this is for all of us, if you could get rid of one Republican in the Senate, who would it be? Tom, kind of a difficult one, but I think either Ted Cruz might be number 1 on my list. Send him back to Canada. Sorry, guys. You can keep him. We've got Bieber anyway, so you guys can take him back. Get rid of him or Mitch McConnell, which it looks like Mitch McConnell might be gotten rid of anyway. So those are my picks. Probably Ted Cruz.
John Bozeman. John Bozeman.
Any reason why, Jordan?
He's from Arkansas.
Enough said, right?
All right, home players, yeah.
I'd
All right, so
I'd either go with, I suppose Ted Cruz is the most obvious one. I think but I almost want to keep him there just because he provides so much fun, and I think he's relatively harmless now, or at least at the moment. He's harmless. Maybe come 2016 he could end up doing some more damage. But there are a number of others. David Vitter, he's just one of the worst shills, I think, out of all the Republican parties. Can't stand him. I think I'd like to get rid of Ted Cruz. I'd have to say is my number 1. I just think he's the most prominent. I have to go with him.
Are we talking people, politicians, or congressmen we'd replace or something? Was that the question? Sorry, I was reading the chat. I missed it.
If you could get rid of one senator, who would you get rid of?
Oh, yeah. Ted Cruz, hands down. Unlike Steven, I'm not entertained by Ted Cruz. The big thing for me is I don't view Ted Cruz as a politician. I view him as an actor. He plays a role. He plays to the base that he has. But there's a reason he keeps dragging that character out. It's because the only one he knows, because he's not a politician who's able to, at the very least, lie properly. He just keeps spewing the same shit that fact check keeps coming back and saying, no, that's not true.
No, what
So he's
plan
not
are you
even able to
looking
put
at,
on a
right?
face that says, oh, but I believe I support this instead. And oh yeah, it's not even a face that says, oh yeah, I believe this, but secretly doesn't. It's a face that keeps saying the stupid shit because he doesn't know what else to say. And I think he's horrendously dangerous, and I want him gone. I think there's no one else in American politics I hate more than Ted Cruz right now. I want him gone. So,
I'd also say I just thought about Lindsey Graham as well. I think he's arguably more dangerous than Ted Cruz because he's got a bit of
yeah, in a war, definitely in a militaristic sense, you're right.
yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely right in that sense.
Domestically, Ted Cruz. Internationally, Lindsey Graham. Those would be a toss-up between those two.
The other international panelist concurs with that pairing. Yeah.
All right. Next question. Once again, I'm not sure who it's from, either who asked it first, Aver or Lucy, whoever sent it to the chat first. Thank you for the question. So she asks, thoughts on that sex offender who's going back to school and playing football? I believe that would be Malik Richmond in the Steubenville case. Should he be allowed to back in the same school, and should he be playing on the same football team?
Can I touch on this a bit? Should he be allowed? Should he be allowed?
Yeah.
I think so.
Oh.
Should he do it? No. Should he? Absolutely should not. He should be allowed. At the very least, back in the school. Football team's a different story. Should at the very least technically be permitted to return to the school. Why on God's earth he would ever want to do that, I don't know. Because with all the flack he's gotten over this internationally, you can bet there's a lot of really pissed off people at that school. So if I were him, I would have moved the fuck on, moved somewhere else. Possibly change. I wouldn't say change your name, but
I don't necessarily think he's gotten a lot of flack at that school. You're right that he's gotten a lot of flack across the country and, like you said, internationally. But when it comes to that little Ohio school in Steubenville, all they care about is the football there. That's the whole reason they covered the whole thing up in the first place. One of the coaches, I believe it was one of the coaches, was found hiding
falsifying evidence. Yeah.
Falsifying evidence.
Now, and to be fair, I don't think he...
A lot of flack?
Yeah.
No.
And to be perfectly fair, I don't think he should have gotten out of prison so soon anyway. So I would have been in favor of putting him in there for life.
The argument that I think that he served his time, and he is a sex offender for the next 20 years. Do I think he should be back on the football team? You get suspended and expelled for less. This is rape, remember. When you drop dirty, you're done. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
If you rape a girl, you can come back.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nick in the most part there. He should be allowed to go back to school. That's fine, but he should be permanently kind of monitored. He's not allowed kind of in a room on his own with any kind of female students there. There should be some really tight restrictions what he can and can't do at the school. What he can't do at the school would be allowed to play on any sports teams. He should only be allowed to go there just to attend lessons, just get his education, and that should be it. If he wants to do extracurricular things, move to a different county, move to a different state. If I were him, I'd probably move to a different country sort of thing and just try and start a whole new life, because I think what frustrates people the most about this story is that this kid's life doesn't seem to have been damaged enough. I know it sounds wrong to want to say I want this kid's life to be damaged, but it seems to have been barely unaffected. He's just going to carry on as normal, as if nothing's happened. Okay, he served a bit of time in jail, not enough, but that's, you know, you can argue forever and a day about how long he should not have spent in jail because he was a juvenile, but his life should have been affected a lot more than it has done. I think that's why people are most pissed that, yeah, he should go back to school. But
and Stephen, going back to the flag argument that Nick made earlier, he's not the one receiving the flag. The victim is still receiving death threats. Now, luckily, she went to another school, but there are people that are in that town that are still mad at her for getting raped. Doesn't that seem a little ass backwards to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, again, exactly the same. I don't know what would have caused that sort of mindset or culture. I mean, okay, he may be a really good football player, but even then, I know that if that sort of thing happened in my school, he would have been absolutely hated and vilified. Even if he wanted to come back here, he knew the amount of hate he would have gotten from students, staff, other people's parents. He wouldn't have been able to mentally cope with the amount of kind of evil glares, for kind of want a better turn of phrase, that he'd be getting throughout the rest of his education. Whereas there, he's kind of, I'd like to think that he's not getting kind of patted on the back and stuff, kind of, oh, welcome back sort of thing, they're going to have a big parade for him. But you almost get the sense that they could potentially do that. It's just, I don't know what could have caused that sort of mindset to just be so accepting of the situation, and then also to try and vilify the girl in the case as well. That's another level of problem with the situation. It's a real mess and a real shame.
Yeah, he would be. On your point, Stephen, about him leaving the country, I don't know where he could go. If he came here to Canada, we'd probably give him more shit than they did in the States. Not strictly in Steubenville, but in the States.
Saudi Arabia.
He's not very liked here. Yeah.
They'd be fine with rape out there. They don't have any care for women's rights. Or India, they'd be fine.
If you're a designated sex offender, are you allowed to travel abroad? I actually don't know.
Neither do I. But I don't know. Just send him off to a remote island somewhere, and he can read a book there for all I care.
You're awfully quiet.
Yeah, man, like, this whole situation's really disappointing, and quite frankly, I'm disappointed in us, because after this segment, we damn sure better never do another segment on the school-to-prison pipeline, because that's exactly what I've just listened to us advocate for the last 5 to 10 minutes. As for the you get suspended or expelled for a lot less, he did get suspended and expelled, and he went to juvenile prison while he was expelled. Again, we're blaming the kid for, one, the kid did a horrible, evil thing and should have had to pay time, which he did. But the whole situation, like, we're blaming the kid for the bad acts of everyone else. So, like the girl is still, like, got run out, like, that sucks. And the people that were threatening her and bullying her or whatever, they need to answer for their actions. The football player does not have to answer for the actions of those people. The coach, who we really need to be upset with here, is how light, we're going to gripe about how light of a sentence a kid who did an evil thing got. How much lighter was the sentence of the adults and people in charge and positions of power who did the same, who were culpable in this evil act? Like, that's what we should be upset about. If we're going to say, like, the kid got sentenced for his crime. He got sentenced to a year or whatever in juvenile. He's a registered sex offender now. He's got to do all that. Like, that was what the judge handed down. So that is his punishment. Now, if the judge handed down that you can't participate in school sports, then that should be part of his punishment. But we can't turn around and gripe, and be good lefties and gripe about how kids aren't given a second chance when they screw up. In this particular case, it's pretty egregious, don't get me wrong. But the fact of the matter is the criminal justice system dealt out its punitive action. So, like, it's not helpful for us to want to go for our pound of flesh or whatever in this case, and, like, continue to heap punitive action on this kid after he's paid what was determined to be his debt to society.
Right, and once again, I preface this with you can make an argument that he served his time, so it would be all right. Should he be stopped by law from being on the football team? No, absolutely not. But maybe they should make a decision to what's best for the town, and maybe bringing him back into the football team might not be the best thing.
Well, I want to say this: if the kid gets in the same situation and does the same evil act again, throw the damn book at him. But as it stands right now, he did an evil act. He's paid the debt that the law required. We want criminals to be rehabilitated, not punished for the sake of us getting our revenge or whatever. We can't put our displeasure with the situation all on the kid. And I don't want to excuse what the kid did. What he did was clearly evil.
Yeah, I know. I agree, and we shouldn't kind of be a bunch of Shylocks asking for another pound of flesh through the judicial system. That's all gone. There's nothing we can do about that now. We all probably think he should have served more time, but that's by the by. I think certainly with me, I just feel like the community should vilify him more. His punishment shouldn't be a kind of a one-in-law. It shouldn't be. It's just one of those kind of atmospheric sort of punishments where he should be feeling awful kind of for the next 20 years sort of thing. That should be his punishment. Yeah, everyone in that community should be hating on him. And I'm not saying kind of violence, but they should kind of be not inviting him to parties. They should be kind of other families don't want their kids to go and hang out with him. That sort of atmosphere where he's seen as a bad egg, that should be the sort of atmosphere within that town. But the problem is there doesn't seem to be any sort of that atmosphere at all. I think that's the main problem. That sort of kind of amorphous, like you can't really describe sort of punishment, that should be going on. He should be mentally being punished at the moment by his peers, and he's not. That's what I'd like to see.
Right. At least temporarily, until he's demonstrated he has changed. Yeah.
I think a lot of the problem that we have is not necessarily him. It's how the people that are in charge treat him, and how the people around him, especially with what you're saying, Stephen, that the people around him are saying are being like, oh, okay, welcome back, man. We're sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, they're almost like kind of, oh, glad you're back sort of thing. You shouldn't be glad that a rapist is back in your community, and okay, yes, he could kind of change character and so on and so forth, but that's kind of what I imagine.
No, I've got to stop the bullshit here, dude. Like, we don't know that that's what's happening. Like, the story is not they threw a parade for the kid. The story is the kid went to jail, did his time, and now he's playing football. That doesn't mean he's being honored like a hero for raping a girl.
No, but he's not. I get the sense in the reports I've read that he's not being like vilified or kind of. I'm not saying there should be an angry mob outside his house every night sort of thing, but you just get.
Exactly. We're all of a sudden we're a few good men here. We're advocating for a code red, and like we're saying no, the law's not good enough. We've got to haze this kid. We've got to ostracize this kid. Yada yada yada. Like no, the law deals out punishment. We are a nation of laws. We don't act on vengeance and personal pounds of flesh and vendettas. That's not what we're supposed to be about. We protest that every other time it happens on this show. What this kid did was evil. He should have gone to juvenile prison or whatever, to rehabilitation. He's a registered sex offender. All that should have happened, and it's happened. It's not our job then to continue to punish him above what the law did.
No, but it should be the responsibility. It's almost the moral responsibility of that society to not want him to interact with the other of that society. I'm not saying he should be driven out of town, but I'm saying his life shouldn't be made easy at all in that town. I'm an Old Testament sort of God.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of speculation in this story.
Yes.
We're putting a lot of what we personally feel should happen into this story instead of, or I should say, into this without actually knowing how he's being treated. And once again, Jordan makes some good points that I'll agree with, right? He has paid his debt to society, and as the judge, as the judicial system has met out, right? And he served his time, and he's back. But at the same time, I sort of lean towards one of the arguments from Stephen is like, we're not sure if the community is welcoming him back with, as openly, especially since he did such a heinous crime, right? While also vilifying the victim, and that was the whole issue with the Steubenville thing, is because of how the victim was treated in this and how the perpetrators were not.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's not so much, I guess, a question of further punishment, because I don't agree that he should be punished further, especially through the law. but it's more of a question of how the community treats the both of them, or at least during the entire case. And it's fairly, and you can't really dispute how terribly the community treated the victim, and how well they treated both perpetrators and then the people who attempted to cover up the perpetrators, all in the name of a sport and protecting.
Right, but this gets to Jordan's point again, though, and he's actually won me over completely with what he said. That if that's the case, we should be angry not at the victim for not getting enough glares now that he's back.
Oh no, not the victim, the perpetrator. The perpetrator.
Sorry, the perpetrator. You're right. Yeah, that was bad.
He
the
is not the victim.
No, he is not. You're right. The perpetrator. We shouldn't be mad at the perpetrator for not getting enough glares from the people in town. We should be mad at We should be mad at the town for not giving enough of a shit about the victim.
And that's it.
To view his act as so heinous, but that's not the victim's fault either. So I agree with Jordan's points all around. That actually,
you've nailed it right there, Nick. Exactly, you've nailed that. It's more of an anger at the town for not respecting the victim, and that's what I think that's what a lot of us are really angry about.
And it's difficult to place how to place that. I mean, we're angry at the town for not being more upset about it. But at this point, we can't advocate the town being more upset about it without further punishing them too. So it's a difficult conundrum.
Like we want to take it out on the town by depriving them of that football player that they went to protect because he was so good at football, and yet at the same time, and once again, that's punishing him. So it's a very difficult question.
Now, the one thing I will say, and that it's been raised in the comments a couple times, is the fact that he's a registered sex offender should probably be grounds enough, or I don't understand why he's allowed near minors again, because he's a registered sex offender. And I think that is a fair point to make. Why is he on a football team at high school where there are minors nearby when he's a registered sex offender? That I think is fair. That's a very fair point to ask.
I mean, that just goes into the laws about sex offenders who are minors,
right,
and what they're allowed.
Okay,
that's a much bigger conversation than this one particular.
Right, and if we want to take the conversation in that direction, that would make sense. And if we want to have it in that venue, that makes sense. But not with regards to should the town be upset and should we be upset at the town? Okay, that's unproductive. So,
and I imagine we really got to throw out this whole thing. This caveat to make sure that we mention that not all sex offenders are created equal, by the way, because you can get caught like peeing in a bush and become a sex offender. So I mean, not all sex offenders are equal, but in this guy's case, remember he deserves his sex offender status, and he's going to live with that for the next 20 years.
It's not a light punishment, by the way. It is not a light punishment to carry that with the rest of your life. It is very heavy. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that the case is that they're saying in the comments that he's a registered sex offender and they shouldn't be allowed near minors because he's probably classed as a minor himself still, and he's still relatively young. And he needs to be able to go to school. Like he has to have some form of education. Is that it's a case that he's not allowed kind of unaccompanied or unsupervised. He can't be left alone in a room with other children. There has to be another adult there who's been, I don't know what your equivalent is in America, but here we have a DBS check, which means that you're allowed to work with minors in a kind of safe environment sort of thing. You can be one-on-one with children. So that's probably the sort of scenario that's playing out in the school and why he's been allowed to.
And if that's the case, okay, fine. As long as there's someone there to make sure that nothing like this happens again, whatever. As long as there's someone out there to protect the people around him from him. And maybe a little bit of him from the people around him if he were elsewhere. Okay.
Okay, so any more questions? Because I'm trying to read through.
I have a couple here that I wanted to answer. These are Canadian-specific questions, though, so if you don't want to. Go? All right.
Go. So, I need to look for other questions anyway.
Okay. So Stan asked me.
We have a Canadian on all the time, other than you, so why
I know. I guess I'm just that good, then. All right. So, Stan asked, Nick, since you're a Canadian history major, Has there ever been a severance and complete sovereignty of the Canadian government and its peoples from the Crown? Stan, it's a little tricky. You see, we are still tied to the Crown. But it's not the British Crown. We're tied to the Canadian Crown. Our monarch is the Queen of England. She's the Queen of Canada, and she's the Queen of Australia, and she's the Queen of New Zealand. All of those roles are separate in themselves. So we're not subject to the British. We're not subject to the UK. We have the same person as a monarch, but that monarch fills multiple heads of state positions. That's all it is. That's all the position fills. And even then, her representative here is our Governor General, who really acts as our head of state, if you will. And the Prime Minister is the head of the government. So technically speaking, no, we're still tied to the Crown, but it's a Canadian Crown. We're not tied to a British Crown. We're not tied to an Australian Crown. We're tied to a Canadian Crown. And the monarch just happens to be the same monarch for the rest of those crowns as well. But all of them are separate. We conduct all our own foreign policy. We've done that since the 1930s with the Balfour Declaration. We've conducted our own internal affairs since 1867. We are an entirely independent state in every way, including our head of state. The only similarity is it's the same head of state for the British. That's it. So while we may have the same, the person on the Crown may be the same, we are completely sovereign. We have no political loyalties or affiliations to Britain beyond historical ties. We're completely separate at this point. Okay, that's it.
I would just like to point out at this point in the show that we have been free of the Crown, any Crown, since 1776. So
look how that's worked out for you. We have your American dream. What now?
I'm sorry. What was that, John or Stephen? I couldn't hear you over all of this freedom.
don't let me go.
What
Alex
freedom? You have freedom to be shot by cops now. God, that's all the freedom you have.
Hold on, Nick. I kind of wanted to talk about that whole sovereignty thing. Just to make a point about that.
Is it going to be is it an American patriot joke wrapped in a serious conversation? Because I kind of like those too. So either way.
Hold on.
Oh God, yes it is.
My name is Mark Trahant. I'm the editorial page editor of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer and a member of the Native American Journalists Association.
Okay. A little bit of sovereignty here.
Okay. Oh, is this a native issue? All right.
Most school kids learn about government in the context of city, county, state, and federal. And of course, tribal governments are not part of that at all. Mr. President, you've been a governor and a president, so you have a unique experience looking at it from two directions. What do you think tribal sovereignty means in the 21st century, and how do we resolve conflicts between tribes and the federal and state governments?
Yeah. Tribal sovereignty means that. It's sovereignty.
Oh, this.
I mean, you've been given sovereignty and you're viewed as a sovereign entity.
Okay.
And therefore, the relationship between the federal government and tribes is one between sovereign entities.
See, here's the thing.
Sovereignty.
If only that were actually true. That's actually one of the things that I think is a very serious black mark on all of our records is we don't really give sovereign rights to Native American tribes. And I think that's something we should really fix, that we should recognize their sovereignty as natives. I mean, in Canada they have special status, but that's not the same thing as sovereignty. And I think it warrants some investigation. And I won't go any further with that.
Now watch this drive.
Next question.
Yeah, on to the next questions, guys.
All right. Do we have any? Oh, how do you motivate a rich person or a cop ration to pay their taxes? Or
That's corporation.
I think that was corporation. Cop ration. I was like, cop rations. What are you talking about? Corporation to pay their taxes. What do you guys think?
I would say that kind of it's at the moment it's hard to justify because of where taxes are being spent, namely in the military and stuff. But were there a progressive president and so on and so forth, and you're saying that it goes to schools, you know, if you increase education funding, you're going to have smarter kids, then that means a couple of years down the line you're going to have more doctors. That doctor could end up saving your life. That scientist could end up kind of inventing a drug that was kind of save your own kid's life a couple of years down the line. It will invent kind of safer methods of transport. I'd play it through the kind of the science and education sort of route. At least that's the first thing that springs to my mind, anyway.
Yeah. So this is the one here. Create a tax system that doesn't tax you as much that doesn't tax corporations as much, you know, based on the kind of the ways that we have now, but that it highly taxes money that is taken out of the economy and into personal coffers, for example. And so the way what you do is you don't tax money then that is put back into the company to build infrastructure, jobs, technology, et cetera, so that the only way these people have to avoid paying a high amount of tax is to put money back into the economy and actually create jobs. So like if somebody looks at a problem or looks at the issue of, hey, I make $100 million, I'm going to lose 20 million of that, 30 million of that in taxes, or I can put 20 million, 30 million that back into my business, I come away with the same amount, and if I put it back into my business grows and I make more in the next fiscal year. And so that's what you've got to do. As long as you make it about, you know, we have a system that in no way rewards putting money back into the economy, then people will continue to keep it for themselves.
Okay. I think I missed probably about half of that because the Hangout messed up for a minute here.
Yeah,
But,
so that wasn't just me then. Okay.
Yeah, you were essentially arguing to lower corporate taxes but eliminate loopholes, right?
No. I'm arguing that you create loopholes that benefit the economy. So the way that you don't pay it's not so much corporate taxes as it is like personal income taxes, but the way you end up not paying taxes is that you're not taxed on money that goes back into actually building the business or the corporation or the service it provides. So whether that's hiring people, whether that's building new offices and infrastructure, you know, things that actually, shovel-ready jobs, you know, things that create an actual vibrant economy. So the example I use is if you have a tax structure that's going to tax someone they make $100 million, they get taxed $20 million, or they can make $100 million, put $20 million back into the company. Either way, they're going to lose $20 million, and their tendency then is going to be to take the path that puts the $20 million back into the company, because then the company might be more profitable next year and they come out ahead. Whereas now we've got a system that favors you holding on to your wealth, hiding it away in all these places that don't really contribute to the economy and certainly not to the middle class.
So basically you're advocating for a system where it would lower or eliminate your taxes if you reinvested in your business to create jobs, right?
Exactly, because the whole point of most of these taxes, our tax system's really specialized, and so like things like roads and stuff like that, they don't really come out of like income taxes and stuff. But the whole purpose, like why we have Social Security tax and payroll tax, is to pay for all these government services. And so if you can build a tax code that makes the private sector do that already and eliminates the need for some of those government services, then you've got a good tax code. But as it stands now, we've got a tax code that doesn't do that and also doesn't really fund those government services either. So it's the worst of both worlds. And I would much rather see us develop something that rewards actual good behavior. I don't want to punish businesses for being successful, but I do want to punish them for being greedy. And so I think kind of what I laid out would go a long way towards doing that.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It seems to make sense. Apparently there was a poll in the chat that named you that renamed you McDonald. You have any thoughts on that?
I think it's ironic that happened after I stopped broadcasting from McDonald's.
Interesting.
You know.
No, this is a different McDonald. It's MacDonald, not McDonald.
McDonald.
Yeah, so it's Scottish.
Sorry, MacDonald. I'm not sure what it references. I'm confused about the whole thing.
Well, my mom's maiden name is McClendon, so I guess maybe it's a return to my roots. I don't know.
All right. Serious question. How do we put people on one accord to help and educate the poor? I think I got that right.
What?
On their own accord, I think. How do we get people on their own accord to help?
No, she's saying
educate the poor.
How do we get people on one accord, meaning all together? How do we get everybody on the same page to help the poor?
That's why I'm not. That's why I shouldn't be the question
guy. Technically speaking, you never will. There has never really been a case where everybody's been unanimous in a decision in a democracy. But how do you get the majority? You need a really good marketing campaign to demonstrate the need of the poor. And what's happening now is you don't have that. You have disparaging voices in rather major and influential organizations labeling the poor as lazy and that it's their own fault. So when you have voices like that sowing dissent within the community, you can't have that. So what you need is some sort of you need a really good marketing campaign. It's the only way I can think of describing it. Is you really need to demonstrate that those opinions are wrong, flat out, and in a way that's so compelling to everybody that, or not everybody, but most people, that they stop and listen. And right now you don't have that really, at all. I mean, you could maybe get 30% of the people to sort of say, yeah, this needs to change. But there's another maybe third who will sort of disagree, and probably another third who's not even paying attention. So you need something that's compelling, that really gets to the heart of the issue, but grabs everyone's attention and gets them talking. And I don't know how you do that. So
part of it is, I think, about changing the conversation. Once again, like we said, we've had this narrative here in America that the poor will just continue to take, and that our education system is being ruined. It's terrible. It's horrible. It's the unions are destroying it, and public education is terrible. Your kids. I mean, look at these failing schools. Now, what they don't tell you is that they've actually made people turn against public education, which worked for a long time here in America, and worked really well because it was well funded, right, and well managed. And now you have people that have turned against that. You've taken the funding out of schools. You've turned that, the public schools are failing into a self-fulfilling prophecy through their actions. And so, in order to get a shift back to that, back to emphasizing public education, you actually do have to try to sell it, and then, of course, refund it, and to show that public education can work. And it does work, and it has worked before. We just have to invest in it, and we also have to manage it well. And there are certain things that you can say about the unions that I won't necessarily be against, because there are pros and cons to a union. Once again, even talking about teacher tenure, stuff like that can be changed, right? But you do still need that union as well. And so I think marketing campaigns on all those different fronts about how unions are helpful, even if they're not perfect, how public education is the best form of education to get opportunity for everyone, as well as giving opportunity to the poor to help them as well, because what's going to get you out of poverty is education, investment.
Yeah, so you can push a narrative all you want, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to do. But let's keep it real. We're pushing a narrative right now. Like, for every narrative, there's a counter narrative, and right now in American history, we're at a point where the counter narrative that the poor are evil, or at worst, or lazy at best, that's what's winning the day. So in terms of like a practical thing that we can actually do that bears itself out, is like we know what is the big split down, like whether or not you're willing to help the poor, or whether or not you don't want to, is empathy, right? And the wealthier you get, the further distance you get from the poor, the less you see them in your day-to-day, and the less empathy you have. So what we need is what a lot of countries have, is a mandatory, after you graduate from high school, call it 2 years of service. Now in America, well, actually, I tell you what, we can't make it mandatory in America because that would violate some of our principles. So let's do this. It's a trade-off. You give 2 years either in military service, civil service. If you want to make it real American, even allow an option for religious service, as long as you can prove that it's doing actually some kind of quantifiable charitable good and providing a service to people. You give people those 3 options. They give 2 years, then the government pays for your college. Do something like that. Incentivize it somehow, and like that incentive will bring a lot of people into that system. And once people get out and serve and actually meet people, and that becomes ingrained in your culture, that you have a duty to serve, that it's not something you can do if you feel like doing. That goes a long way, and I think we've seen that. That's bared itself out in other countries. It's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet. You're still going to have greed, but it's a very real, practical way that you can change a lot of that mindset.
All right.
I was just going to say my view on that is that I think it is about 85% down to the marketing. You still got to have the actual substance there, and one or two of the things that kind of Jordan alluded to, those sort of programs may potentially work. Personally, I wouldn't go for the kind of religious service sort of thing, but that's my own view. And I don't want to come across as somebody from an ivory tower sort of thing, but for the most part, most people aren't paying attention. They're not switch on, okay, everyone watching this, they're actually interested in the news, they care about the minutiae details, they want to know what's going on. But unless this is a wild dispersion, just from my kind of own research at university, most people aren't that well informed in America in general. They're informed about 1 or 2 little things here and there, but they don't have a good general overall picture. So I think having just a really clear, simple message that's going to promote something is the best way to get anything done in the country. It's like we've seen it with kind of like healthcare was a problem because there wasn't any good messaging. Gun reform hasn't been done because there hasn't been any simple, clear, strong messaging. It does just come down to marketing at the end of the day. The world is run by PR at the moment.
Right. It seems like everything is about PR these days, and that's kind of what sucks. I mean, we're a society of consumers, right? And so we see ads bombarded at us every day.
Hold on.
Let me make my point. Marketing.
You can finish your point. Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, the same. Marketing to some extent works,
right?
Because that's what we're used to.
The only thing I would contend is this notion that it's a recent thing. This is how you people have gotten things done throughout history. This is how you've done it. You've marketed. That's it. Because it works. The only difference now is it's marketing to everybody, whereas before you were marketing to a much smaller audience, in part because your audience of people who you gave a shit about and who could actually influence politics was smaller. Now we have votes. But throughout history, it's all been about marketing and how you market yourself. So it's not a new development, but that's the only thing I would contend is this notion that a lot of this stuff is new. It's not. It's a new form of a very old classic trend that you make yourself look good. That's how you get support, or how you push an issue. So,
all right.
Anyway,
2 more questions. Let's go. Let's see. We've got.
There's one here. There's one here in the sidebar too. This was for everybody.
I was wondering whether or not to read that one first or last. Okay. I think we'll go with this one first because it's a little bit more involved, and then we'll go with the last one about art and music. Okay, so Lucy asked, do you see any correlation between the youth reacting to Gaza and the youth reacting to what she calls Kyrgyzstan? That's very clever, by the way. I like that. What do you think?
I'll take it if no one else wants it first. Yes, but what's surprising to me is I expected a much bigger reaction out of the older crowd. the baby boomers. It might shock some people, but we got to keep in mind. I have family, for example, who were born 1960 and they're like 50s now. So they lived through the Cold War, this thought of imminent destruction. They lived through constantly battling for civil rights. They lived through the civil rights, through this struggle for maintaining civil liberties, even in the face of what was perceived to be possibly imminent destruction. And when the Berlin Wall fell, they thought, oh man, we're in the clear. We can have all these liberties. We'll never go back to those dark days where we had to put our liberties on hold for fear of a threat. And then September 11th, 2001 happened. And some of these people slowly saw those liberties chipped away one by one. And now here we are, back in almost the same situation of the civil rights, where we have black kids being killed in streets for really no crimes at all.
Okay, so
I'm astounded that the older generation isn't. How did we get back here?
I think the older generation, and I'm not saying that it's all of the older generation, obviously, but I think a lot of them are actually a good deal of them. Caveats, me just guessing. A lot of them are pissed off, but they're part of the Tea Party, and they're watching Fox News. Average age of a Fox News viewer for O'Reilly is like 72. Those are your boomers right there.
That's the older boomer, yeah. But.
So maybe they are getting mad, but they're like mad at the people, like, oh, you black people, you're taking our money and our welfare. And maybe that's what they're mad. I don't know. Like I said, it's not everybody, obviously. All right. So,
really? No one else wants to touch this one?
I'm thinking that we should probably wrap this up soon because Jordan and Steven are tired. I mean, Jordan's still at the office, by the way, guys. So he's in the office. He's not at home. He's in the office. So he's putting in extra double time duty being on the show tonight. So his time is precious.
Yeah, I'm starting to flag a bit now because it's currently just gone 4 a.m. here.
Yeah, and it's 4 a.m. over in the UK. So we're going to have to wrap this up here with the last question. Should art music and everything like that be brought back into schools? Absolutely yes. Kind of interesting. My wife and I, we've been packing up. Okay, so we're getting ready to do a move within the next couple of months. Just finding a place, a bigger office, all that sort of awesome stuff. And she's going through all of her old stuff, and she found an article that she wrote that was published in the local paper. Now, this article was her saying that we need to get music back into schools. And it had all these different citations that show that music, especially, helps people do better. Having access to to being able to do music in school actually helps outcomes, keeps people out of doing crime. It increases outcomes all around. And so I think that's one reason that it's important. Art can also do the same thing. Those are important things. And I think as a society we seem to have forgotten arts and music in our education and simply just went for, the reading, writing, arithmetic, No Child Left Behind, standardized test scores, go, 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 and didn't really sit back and enjoy the things that make us, a society, and that's things like the arts and culture.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually one of Mike Huckabee's big crusades, because he's a big music guy, and he's a real hardcore into getting arts back in the schools and getting funding for it. Not just art. Like kids should be taught to appreciate art. There's data, there's science that shows like it's good overall. But even just like school, there should at least be some part of the day that kids look forward to. So like I grew up in an agricultural town, and in high school I learned how to weld and how to fix small gas engines and like drive tractors. Like those were classes I took in school. I also played French horn in band. Like I had, throughout the monotony of the day of having to learn, for these standardized tests and everything, and study subjects, some of which I enjoyed, some of which I didn't. I always knew, like, hey, 7th period's going to roll around and I'm going to get to fire up an arc welder and make stuff. Like, that's awesome. The more and more I'm afraid that my kids, won't get to realize that. And on top of just like, what it does for kids, how much it makes, school something they don't completely hate. I mean, let's keep it real. Like, it's also good to have skills in life, and it's like I think school should be a place where you learn more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Quick welder-related story. One of my jobs that I worked in, this is the first time I was learning how to actually weld. Didn't have the welding jacket on. Probably guess where that came from. What happened next? I set myself on fire. Burned up good portion of my shirt, all while my welding instructor was laughing at me because he's like, "Hey, if you set yourself on fire, I'm not going to tell you. You'll find out soon enough." All right, that's fair. Ever since then, you wear the damn jacket. All right, welding story over. Go ahead, guys.
I would agree with everything that's been said, that we need art and stuff. The one caveat I would add is, God, we also need more history too. Too many people don't understand how common a lot of trends in their daily lives and in the world are, and how they got the way they are. And I think there's tremendous value in understanding that. So I would emphatically put history on that list with them. That more people need to take history.
We don't need more history. We need better history teachers. You're not the only history major in the channel. I was actually a history double major for a while, and I had thankfully some really good history teachers in school. I also had a few that weren't good, and it's a subject that our society doesn't really value right now, and so all the more reason like good teachers make all the difference there. I think shoving more hours of a subject that isn't being taught well isn't going to be helpful. But I totally agree with you. History needs to be important.
All these different things are things that you touched on that are not valued by our society nowadays. There's little value in the arts. I mean, like, even when you're talking to people about college, somebody's like, well, if you want to be doing nothing and never get a job and never do anything of value, just get a liberal arts degree. Nobody's ever going to hire you for that. That's because we don't value stuff like that. We don't value liberal arts. We don't value the arts. We do value music, but it depends on what kind of music it is. So, I mean, and that can go either way, but there are certain things that we don't value as a society, and certain things that we value more than we should in our society. So when it comes down to reintroducing those things into the public school system, definitely I think we do our children a disservice when we don't give them the opportunity to do these things outside of school, to do these things in school as well, learning, art, music, history, whatever.
One other thing we should teach in school: firearm safety. I got my hunter's education card for credit in high school. I guess it was really in junior high, and it was awesome. So we should definitely do that.
Yes, you Yanks could use that. That would make sense.
All right, so Steven is out, and we should probably let Jordan go home, back to his family. I think he'd be much appreciated to that. And speaking of appreciation, we appreciate you coming out here and hanging out with us here on TYT Community and asking your questions. I do tend to prefer it when you do the Twitter, but if you can't, once again, send your questions through our chat. It's easier for the Twitter, since we can actually collect everything. But nonetheless, thank you guys for sending in your questions. We really appreciate it. We love answering them. We really enjoy the Q&A sessions at the end of the show. Stay tuned. Tomorrow, where we come back with the Social Justice Hour here on TYT Community, hosted by me, of course. Gonna have some great social justice stories. You just have to tune in to see what they are, because I don't even know what they are yet. So if you have any story suggestions, you can tweet me at JustPolitics or at TYT Community, or go to our Facebook page. Pages TYT Community and TYT Nation on Facebook. And thank you guys. If you haven't already, subscribe. You know, all the normal stuff. Other than that, we will see you guys tomorrow night on the Social Justice Hour. And you know what? I need to actually start. I need to make an outro. That's what I need to do. Because this.
Yeah.
You need an outro.
Yeah,
But
just
anyway.
one more quick addition too. If any of you found the channel via the TYT Network and you just cycle through their affiliated pages and you clicked on us that way, if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe, because I know that a lot of you probably actually do that. You just go to the network's page and you click on affiliated channels and you find us that way.
You said doo-doo.
Damn it, Jordan! Trying to be serious here. But yeah, please actually subscribe, because it does really help. So.
Yeah, and of course, we do have to apologize, even though it's not really our fault, about the YouTube slowness. I know you guys were working, trying to ask your questions and working with a kind of a buggy interface. I think the YouTube monkeys are out and they're fucking with things, which means they're going to roll out something. I don't know. I'll probably hear about it tomorrow when I talk to Aaron. So he'll probably tell me about all the wonderful things YouTube is doing to break our show.
Quickly. Hashtag blame Sean. Let's get this trending. Hashtag blame Sean. Sean's fault. Do it. Trend it. Trend it. Yeah, trend it, damn it, guys. Trend it.
And by the way, if you guys are interested in helping the show, helping us get better bandwidth, better stuff, Patreon. You can fund us directly. Because that's really what we want to do, is to build a subscriber base and not have to rely on advertisers or YouTube or all that other bullshit. So we'd be directly accountable to you. So go to the Patreon if you can. Patreon.com/TYTNation. All right, so that's it.
Hey, Jeff, before we go, how does someone get on the show?
Sean.
That was lyrical.
That's exactly how Sean says it. And he always has to remind me every show, because I always forget. If you want to be on the show, email me, jeffw@tytnetwork.com. Send me a message at all the different various social media sites I have rattled off in the last 10 minutes. And I'll get back to you. We'll figure something out. Obviously, new people, always welcome to be on the panel. You don't have to do anything special. Camera, mic, you're good to go. If you can't do camera, we'll figure something out. Maybe not doing it in this format, but I'll definitely, either hang out or go on the radio show. I'll find a way to talk to you guys, even if it's not over video. So we'll find a way to incorporate you guys somehow. So with all that said, I think I've got all the plugs. All right? Oh, by the way, you should definitely check out Jordan's new Twitter page. His handle, @SeanIsWrong.
Love it.
Follow me at SeanIsWrong on Twitter. Hey, good night, everybody. God bless.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. See you tomorrow.